Chapter 2173, He's not your father, right? Boom. Like a crashing wave, a palm strike surged over, bringing with it a terrifying might that made it seem like the heavenly fury of a great emperor. When the palm strike arrived, Sui Yuanliang's large hand was immediately crushed into oblivion. A figure immediately appeared, landing before Ling Jinxue and Wenren Yu. This person was none other than Ling Han. His face was filled with killing intent, and his regulation of slaughter had more so become material and tangible. This regulation swarmed around his body, and it was as if it could crush heaven and earth. Sui Yuanliang had initially been calm and uncaring. Although his attack had been blocked, he naturally didn't need to unleash his full power against a measly fourth severance cultivator. Thus, this attack had utilized less than 1/10,000th of his power. As such, it wasn't surprising that Ling Han had managed to block his strike. He could tell that Ling Han's battle prowess was only at the peak stage of the fourth secret, and it had yet to reach the fifth secret. However, when Ling Han appeared before him, he couldn't maintain his composure any longer. In fact, his jaw almost dropped to the floor. Heaven's soul. Motherfucker. This person who possesses a fourth secret battle prowess is actually a heaven's soul cultivator? How is this possible? A string of curses raced through Sui Yuanliang's mind, and he felt as if he were having a dream. Everything felt so unreal. How is it a heaven's soul cultivator? How is this possible? The gulf between the dividing soul tier and the immortal palace tier was like the gulf between heaven and earth. Regardless of how prodigious one was, this wasn't a gulf that could be overcome. In reality, however, Ling Han had indeed blocked his strike. He possessed the battle prowess of a fourth secret elite. Old bastard, you're seeking death. Ling Han roared with raging killing intent. With a stomp, he unleashed his regulations of lightning and regulations of time in unison, arriving before Sui Yuanliang in a flash. He then clenched his fists to attack. No matter how astonished and stunned Sui Yuanliang was, he naturally wouldn't allow Ling Han to attack him at will. He hurriedly raised his right hand to block Ling Han's attack. With his reflexes as a cultivator, he could unleash a terrifying power with this hurried strike even though he was shell-shocked. Pung! Their attacks collided, and his body only leaned back a slight amount. Meanwhile, Ling Han was directly sent flying. Sure enough, his opponent only possessed a battle prowess at the fourth secret. He was no match for him. Sui Yuanliang felt slightly more confident. At the very least, he possessed a definitive advantage in terms of battle prowess. However, he still couldn't overcome the unease in his mind. This was because Ling Han was far too freakish. As a measly heaven soul cultivator, he actually possessed a battle prowess at the fourth secret. In fact, his battle prowess could even reach the peak stage of the fourth secret. Just what in the world was this? How could there exist such a freak in this world? Activating his void space, Ling Han instantly flashed before Sui Yuanliang again. With a turn of his hand, a wave of boundless sword chi swept forth. This was the heaven-destroying 9 swords, a celestial king tier technique. Sui Yuanliang hurriedly moved to block this attack. He possessed an advantage in cultivation level, so he was able to easily block Ling Han's attack. However, he didn't relax in the slightest. Not only was Ling Han's battle prowess heaven-defying, but even his physique was utterly heaven-defying. Even though he was sent flying time and time again, he just couldn't be wounded no matter what. He continued to charge back and attack with vigor and might. This was extremely uncanny. Even though Sui Yuanliang's battle prowess was superior, he was surprisingly the one who was on the defensive. He had no option but to defend. Ling Han was far too quick, and his attacks were also far too furious. For each one of Sui Yuanliang's attacks, Ling Han could attack 5 times or even more. Sui Yuanliang was clearly more powerful, but because of this, he had no option but to defend. He was unable to launch a counterattack. His defenses were watertight, so he wouldn't face any life-threatening danger. When his shock finally subsided, what replaced it was a feeling of incandescent rage. He, a fifth secret elite, was actually being pummeled by a measly Heaven Soul Jr. Boom! Sui Yuanliang unleashed a powerful attack, with 8 columns of azure flames erupting from his body, and forming the 8 trigrams. Mythical mountain quaking fire, he roared. Numerous celestial symbols materialized, with each of them possessing a mystical ability. However, Ling Han was unfazed, and he directly soared through the flames as he threw another punch. He possessed a source power of fire, so as long as his opponent's battle prowess didn't surpass his too much, any fire element attack would be like blowing dust onto his body. It would be completely ineffective. Right now, he was as furious as could be. There was only a single thought running through his mind, and that was to pummel the bastard in front of him to death. This bastard actually wanted to kill his son. Boom! The 9 source powers of heaven and earth within him also started to seethe. As if feeling Ling Han's fury, they also unleashed the rage of heaven and earth. Sui Yuanliang couldn't help but feel shock and disbelief. His opponent was clearly a heaven soul cultivator, yet the aura that he unleashed was like that of a divine son, the son of heaven and earth. This was an aura that couldn't be sullied, this was an aura that could only be revered. Otherwise, he would become the enemy of heaven and earth and invite great calamity. Just who in the world is this person? If his opponent were a celestial king, then so be it. Celestial kings could control the heavenly Tao, so it wouldn't be a stretch to call them a divine son, the son of heaven and earth. However, a heaven soul cultivator? Just what kind of joke was this? Ling Han's fighting spirit continued to soar without limits. At this moment, he had already forgotten about source powers of heaven and earth, power of regulations, and so on. He simply swung his fists, yearning to unleash his uncontrollable fury. It wasn't only Sui Yuanliang who was shocked into a stupor. Tang Tao, Ling Jinxue, and Wenren Yu were also transfixed with shock. It was just that Wenren Yu was too weak, and his level was too low, so he only knew that Ling Han was incredibly strong. However, he didn't understand the astonishing implication of Ling Han's strength. Meanwhile, Tang Tao and Ling Jinxue were truly stunned into silence. Which one of them didn't know about the gulf between the dividing soul tier and the immortal palace tier? Moreover, Sui Yuanliang was a 5th secret elite, so he could easily crush even 4th secret elites. Yet, he was actually unable to defeat a measly dividing soul tier cultivator. Sui Yuanliang's battle prowess was seemingly superior, yet in reality, he was the one on the back foot and being pummeled. They could see this with their own eyes, yet they were still unable to fathom and believe it. The most astonished person was Ling Jinxue. He had been brought into the celestial realm at a young age, and he had spent few years even with his mother, Helian Xuanxue, before being sent to the heavenly Saint Palace. Even so, he still had some memories of her. As for Ling Han, however, he had absolutely no impression. Thus, he naturally wouldn't think that the man who had suddenly leaped out in explosive fury out to save him was actually his father. Ling Jinxue's expression was extremely strange. Why is this freakish person helping me? Moreover, why is his expression as if his son has been beaten? Is this really necessary? He's not your father, right? Wenren Yu murmured. Because Ling Han was far too mighty, he also started to gradually relax. He started to believe that they could make it out of this dangerous situation alive. Thus, he was also in the mood to joke around. How is that possible? Ling Jinxue replied. He shook his head without hesitation. What a joke. His father was still in a small world, and even though 10,000 years had already passed, he had probably only just succeeded in opening the sky, and entering the ancient realm. It was hard to say whether he had even reached the mountain river tier. It wasn't that he was belittling his father. Rather, this was decided by Ling Han's environment. It would be useless regardless of how talented he was. Cultivation naturally couldn't be without resources. Actually, you really do share some similarities with him, Wenren Yu said. He had initially been joking, but upon closer observation of Ling Han, he became increasingly curious. Ling Jinxue shook his head, clearly refusing to believe this. Jinxue. Right at this moment, he suddenly heard a voice from behind him. Ling Jinshue's heart shuddered, and he replied without even turning around. Mother. Wenren Yu clapped his hands, and said, and you're still saying that he's not your dad? Even your mother has come, so can your father still be far away? Hun Yo and the other women arrived, and Helian Xuanxue directly rushed over to her son. Ling Jinxue wanted to move, yet he suddenly coughed out a mouthful of blood. Junior brother Ling, don't push yourself. Chen Shuangshuang said as she rushed over. With Helian Xuanxue on the left and her on the right, they together helped Ling Jinxue up. Mother, why have you come? Ling Jinxue asked in curiosity. However, he was feeling even more anxious. In order to obtain that sword, the Dragon Universe Palace was willing to kill everyone in their way. Ling Ha? What did you call her? Mother? Chen Shuangshuang was extremely simple-minded, and only at this moment did she suddenly notice this detail. Chapter 2174, Father. Wasn't she a distant relative? How did she suddenly become his mother? Upon seeing Chen Shuangshuang, Ling Jinxue became even more anxious, saying, Senior sister, why haven't you returned to the sect? It's too dangerous here. Fuck. You've forgotten about your mother after getting a wife? After meeting her son, and with her husband to fight against the enemy, she was feeling much better than before, even though her anxiousness was yet to subside. At the very least, she was now in the mood to think about other things as well. She grabbed her son's ear, and said, Good one, you're not even going to care about your mother now? Hee hee. Ling Jinxue could only chuckle foolishly. Exactly, you shouldn't be like that, Chen Shuangshuang said in concurrence. You need to worry about your mother first. Ah, damn it. Such a beautiful sister, but I have to refer to her as auntie in the future? She wore an aggrieved expression. Mucking around with beautiful women was her greatest indulgence, yet there was actually a beautiful woman whom she couldn't refer to as sister now. This caused her to feel extremely aggrieved. Ling Jinxue also wore a gloomy expression. Why was this senior sister so airhead? Beside them, Wenren Yu was able to understand everything, and an expression of realization spread across his face. Hang on, who is this person? He's far too powerful. Chen Shuangshuang was extremely simple-minded, and she had already forgotten about the matters from just a moment ago. She pointed at Ling Han, and her expression was as if she had seen a ghost. A Heaven Soul Cultivator was actually battling against a fifth secret elite? And he was even enjoying the upper hand, and pummeling the fifth secret elite? Even though he would be sent flying each time he was hit. However, so what if he was sent flying? He wouldn't suffer any injuries, and he would immediately charge back. He was just like a god of war. He was far too freakish. I don't know, either, Ling Jinxue murmured in reply. Pa. Helian Xuanxue lightly smacked her son's head, chiding, That's your father. Pooh. Ling Jinxue and Chen Shuangshuang spluttered and choked in unison. Ha. And my father? Ling Jinxue asked in astonishment. Isn't father still trying to open the sky in the small world? Just how prodigious is your father? He arrived at the celestial realm a long time ago, and it was only because the celestial realm was too large that he spent 10,000 years to find us, Helian Xuanxue said with a proud expression. She harbored great reverence toward Ling Han. Ling Jinxue couldn't help but grimace. As a prodigy, he was a relatively proud person. He had once dreamed about entering the small world to help his father open the sky when he became powerful enough. Or perhaps he would leave an abundant amount of cultivation resources in the ancient realm for his father when he finally managed to open the sky, helping him soar to greater heights. Even though there were explicit rules in the celestial realm forbidding people from bringing any living things back from the ancient realm or small worlds, powerful sects could still enjoy a slight exception. They could occasionally bring a few people to the celestial realm, and no one would bat an eye. Of course, they could legitimately only do this very occasionally. Otherwise, the ninth heaven celestial king tier forces would all gang up to attack them. Regardless of how powerful they were, they wouldn't be able to escape the fate of destruction. In Ling Jinshua's mind, he had only started cultivating a few dozen years later than Ling Han. However, the environment that they were in was completely different. He could receive more cultivation resources than Ling Han even dared to dream of. As such, he should have instantly surpassed Ling Han's cultivation level, and left his father far behind him. However, the reality was starkly different. Not only was Ling Han's cultivation superior to his, but even his battle prowess was as mighty and domineering as the heavens. He was at the heaven's soul, yet he could rival fifth secret elites. Good heavens! This is my father? Your father is truly powerful. Qin Shuangshuang murmured. She had been given a fright by Ling Han before, and now she was given another fright. Fifth secret, Ling Han's limit was actually rivaling a fifth secret elite. I know, Ling Jinshue replied in a daze. Even now, he was still unable to fathom that a dividing soul tier cultivator could actually be this freakish. Moreover, this unbelievably freakish person was actually his father. Tang Tao looked over, and there was slight hesitation in his eyes. He was pondering whether he should target Ling Jinshue and the others or not. Initially, this wouldn't have been a problem. They were only juniors at the dividing soul tier and severing mundane tier, so as a fourth secret elite, he could have easily captured them with a single wave of his hand. Now, however, he was apprehensive of Ling Han. Could Sui Yuanliang defeat Ling Han? This was impossible. Even if Ling Han was unable to suppress Sui Yuanliang, if he wanted to leave, who could stop him? Moreover, once Ling Han left, news of them hunting disciples of the Heavenly Saint Palace would definitely get out. When a celestial king was enraged, even heaven and earth would change color. Right now, they were facing an eighth heaven celestial king. The Dragon Universe Palace was definitely done for. That being the case, why would he still stay in the Dragon Universe Palace? Even though he was the second palace leader, in reality, his relationship with Sui Yuanliang was only one of partnership and mutual utilization. How could he die for Sui Yuanliang? With this in mind, he immediately made a decision. He directly turned around to leave, as carefree and casual as could be. Tang! Tao! Sui Yuanliang roared in rage. However, Tang Tao didn't as much as pause, instantly disappearing into the dense forest and vanishing without a trace. He only knew that Sui Yuanliang viewed the cold moonlight sun sword with great importance. However, as for its explicit use, Sui Yuanliang hadn't revealed even the slightest bit of information. Yet, he still wanted him to fight with his life? What a joke! Meanwhile, Ling Jinshue, Qin Shuangshuang, and Wenren Yu went numb in the head when they saw this. They knew that Tang Tao had fled because of Ling Han. That was a fourth secret elite. Elsewhere, Wenren Tang was trembling in fear. He discovered that he had ridden on the wrong coattail. Heavens! Not only was Ling Jinshue the disciple of an eighth heaven celestial king tier force, but he was more so the son of that freakishly powerful person. And to think that Wenren Tang had actually sold out Ling Jinshue? Could he still live? Wenren Tang collapsed to the ground, and he felt his ambitions for power slowly draining away from him. Right now, he only wanted to live a calm and peaceful life. Immediately after Tang Tao left, many other members of the Dragon Universe Palace hurried over. Palace leader, the 19th young master, was killed by this person. Elder Qing Qing was also killed. The third palace leader was also killed. They reported these pieces of news one by one, all of them incriminating Ling Han. Sui Yuanliang was also angered upon hearing this. I haven't even killed your son yet you've already killed my son and the third palace leader? And you're acting as if you're the victim? Brat, I'm going to destroy you, he howled. With a wave of his right hand, he retrieved a damaged piece of paper. This was a burnt piece of paper, and only less than half of it remained. However, once it appeared, it radiated with an overwhelming might that could suppress the heavens. It was like a celestial king tier decree that could command the heavens. Suppress him. Sui Yuanliang roared, an expression of reluctance on his face. He had obtained this decree by luck, and it was more so a damaged decree. Once it was used, it was very likely that it couldn't be used again. However, if he didn't kill Ling Han, it would be impossible for him to keep secret his actions of hunting the disciples of the Heavenly Saint Palace. At that time, when the Dragon Universe Palace was destroyed, he would also be killed. Thus, what use would this treasure be, regardless of how powerful it was? In any case, he was dead set on obtaining the Cold Moon Light Sun Sword. Meanwhile, Ling Han had reached a key barrier. Under the influence of his rage, he had forgotten everything, and only had thoughts of battle. This state had allowed him to gradually cultivate a fist technique. This couldn't be regarded as a secret technique per se, as it was only a form of willpower and aura. Regardless of what obstacles lay ahead, he would obliterate them all with his fist. However, Ling Han had a nagging feeling that he was still missing something that would unleash the true might of this fist technique. Only when the piece of damaged paper appeared did a cold chill suddenly run down his spine, causing him to come to a sudden realization. He was missing the threatening pressure of life and death. His physique was far too powerful. This was a good thing, but because he didn't need to worry about life and death, it meant that he couldn't appreciate the pressure and intensity of battle. When these feelings finally arose, he instantly attained enlightenment. Boom! He threw a punch, causing violent flames to billow through the air. Chapter 2175, Betrayal of the Decree. Pung! Meanwhile, Sui Yuanliang was still activating the piece of damaged paper. This piece of damaged paper was far too high in level, so it was crucial for him to be extremely careful. Otherwise, he might even suppress himself. However, Ling Han's punch brought with it an invincible willpower. This punch was far too terrifying, and he felt as if it were impossible to block and evade. In the next instant, the punch landed, striking his lower abdomen, and causing him to instantly curl over in pain. He felt as if he were about to vomit all of his internal organs, and his activation of his secret technique was immediately stopped. He was absolutely astounded. In reality, the might of this punch wasn't that powerful at all. However, the willpower that was imbued within it was far too powerful, so much so that it was surprisingly able to suppress his divine sense. He was unable to muster any thought of resistance. If it weren't for his strong desire to live, allowing him to forcefully activate a barrier of defenses, he would have perhaps been killed by that punch. He was only a measly dividing soul tier cultivator, so why did he possess such powerful willpower? It was as if he represented the heavens. Sui Yuanliang naturally didn't know that Ling Han possessed 9 source powers of heaven and earth, all of which had been utilized in this punch. Those were source powers of heaven and earth. These were matters at the celestial king tier, so they could naturally suppress those at the immortal palace tier. Ling Han suddenly let out a loud laugh. Unleashing this punch made him experience a great sense of satisfaction. This was a fist technique that he had created, and it was also the Tao that suited him the most. Even though the might of this fist technique wasn't especially great at this moment, it was, after all, a technique that had yet to be perfected. Moreover, his cultivation level was also too low, so there was still much room for refinement and improvement. Indeed, the might of this fist technique was inferior to that of the Great Clash of Source Powers, but its advantage was that it could be easily controlled. This was unlike the Great Clash of Source Powers, which Ling Han could only unleash. After unleashing it, however, it would completely break free from his control. Uncontrollable powers were especially dangerous, even to their owners. Only the Tao that belongs to me can become the most powerful fist technique. I'll call this, the Fists of Fury. With a roar, Ling Han unleashed an endless flurry of punches, all of which were unleashed through the Fists of Fury. They could attack one's mind, punish one's body, and destroy all matter. At this moment, he attained enlightenment. When this fist technique was perfected, its might would definitely be no weaker than that of the Great Clash of Source Powers. Moreover, Once he reached the celestial king tier, the great clash of source powers would be limited by the might of the source powers of heaven and earth. However, the fists of fury would be different. They would only be limited by his cultivation level. The more powerful he became, the more powerful the fists of fury would become. Die. He swung his fists, and because his raw power had already reached the ascending origin tier, his fists were able to punch at an astonishing speed. Even Sui Yuanliang was unable to block them all in time. He felt as if his vision was drowned out by flying fists. Peng, 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 peng. Ling Han's fists of fury smashed down like rain, forcing Sui Yuanliang to retreat time and time again. Sui Yuanliang's blood churned, and he felt as miserable and pained as could be. He was beside himself with shock. Ling Han had clearly only possessed a battle prowess at the peak stage of the fourth secret, yet he had suddenly soared to a new height, with his battle prowess reaching the fifth secret. Ling Han now genuinely possessed the ability to threaten his life. Is this brat on drugs? No, 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 he's been on drugs this entire time. Otherwise, how can a measly heaven soul cultivator rival a fifth secret elite? It was just that he was too drugged up right now, so much so that even a fifth secret elite such as Sui Yuanliang was facing life-threatening danger. You dare to hunt my son? You're seeking death. Not only had Ling Han's fury not subsided, but it had become even more intense. Ling Han had always felt slightly apologetic to Ling Jinxue. He felt like he hadn't been able to accompany and raise his son, making him an irresponsible father. Just when he was about to find his son to make up for this, he discovered that someone was actually trying to kill the latter. Moreover, they had almost succeeded. How could Ling Han not be furious? I'll kill you, bastard, he roared in rage. Sui Yuanliang felt extremely aggrieved. Your son is only severely wounded and poisoned. But what about me? My son has genuinely been killed. Whom can I complain to? However, Ling Han was far too powerful enough to make him shiver in fear. Thus, his fighting spirit naturally receded like a falling tide. Friend, since your son isn't in any danger, why don't we shake hands and make peace? I'm willing to compensate you. When Sui Yuanliang said this, there was a burning sensation on his face. He wanted to dig himself a hole to hide in. This was far too humiliating. His treasure had been stolen, and his son had been killed, yet he was actively asking for peace. Moreover, he was even offering to compensate his opponent. This was unfathomable. No need. Ling Han said in a cold voice, rejecting his offer. This person wanted to kill his son, so could he let this slide with some mere compensation? If Sui Yuanliang genuinely wanted to compensate him, he could compensate with his worthless life. Friend, don't take things too far. Otherwise, the only result will be a lose-lose situation. In fact, it might even lead to mutual death. Sui Yuanliang howled. Only you will die. Ling Han said, his fists not slowing down one iota. Sui Yuanliang roared in fury, yet he was struck time and time again, which caused his flesh to fracture and split. His aura also fell significantly. A resolute expression flashed across his eyes. If this continued, he might genuinely be pummeled to death by Ling Han. How detestable. He clearly possessed a powerful decree, one which could suppress any immortal palace tier elite once it was activated. However, under Ling Han's furious and unrelenting attacks, he was unable to find any time to unleash this trump card. Fine, since you're forcing me, I'll let you taste the evil fruits of your decision. Sui Yuanliang finally decided to go all out. His body shuddered violently, unleashing orbs of black air that appeared indescribably sinister. Ling Han had already been filled with killing intent, and this sight only made him even more enraged. You actually defected to the force of darkness? You truly deserve death. This sinister aura was none other than the unique characteristic of the other cultivation system. It was something that neither heaven nor earth could tolerate. Naive brat, what do you understand? Sui Yuanliang sneered. Those who win are righteous, and those who lose are wrong. This world is destined to be conquered, and only the revered deities can remain undying. Moreover, the deities will bestow us with true immortality. This heaven and earth possesses immortals' tribulation, but if the deities gain control, they'll erase this immortals' tribulation. At that time, everyone can enjoy immortality. You stupid fool, the heavenly Tao is the true killer. He spoke with conviction and righteousness, and it was clear that these beliefs were already deeply ingrained in his mind. He had been completely brainwashed by the force of darkness. Then I'll kill you in the name of this heaven and earth. Ling Han said with a humph. Before his son, these matters were all of lesser importance. What did it matter if the man practiced the cultivation system of darkness or whatnot? Since he dared to hunt his son, Ling Han would kill him no matter what. In a fit of chaotic rage, Ling Han unleashed his full battle prowess. However, after unleashing the power of darkness, Sui Yuanliang also became significantly more powerful. This was even though he was now detested by heaven and earth, meaning that he was unable to wield the power of regulations. However, this didn't weaken his battle prowess in the slightest. This was reflected by his astonishing recovery ability, and it was as if he possessed an indestructible physique. He instantly regained equal footing with Ling Han. Ha ha ha, I'll send you on your way. Sui Yuanliang said with laughter. His entire body was enveloped in black mist, and he started to activate the Celestial King Tier decree in his hand. Even though it was damaged, it was still powerful enough to kill any immortal palace tier elite. Ling Han only possessed a battle prowess at the 4th secret to 5th secret, so he was naturally unable to rival the power of this decree. Wang! The piece of damaged paper lit up, unleashing a devastating aura. This was the mighty power of a celestial king. Brat, die! Sui Yuanliang shook the decree, and he was just about to unleash the celestial king power to smash Ling Han into smithereens. Whoosh! A ray of light burst forth from the decree, yet right after soaring out, it made an unfathomable turn, and slashed back towards Sui Yuanliang. What? Sui Yuanliang coughed a mouthful of blood in shock. Why was the decree turning around to attack him instead? A ray of light flashed past, causing Sui Yuanliang to instantly stop all of his movements. He could only stare at Ling Han in a daze, and there was still an expression of disbelief frozen on his face. Why had the Celestial King Tier decree suddenly betrayed him? Fuck. Chapter 2176, Lady Wenren. Ling Han was confused at first, but he quickly came to a realization. After unleashing the power of darkness, Sui Yuanliang had already become the enemy of this heaven and earth. Meanwhile, the Celestial King Tier power had represented this heaven and earth, so after being activated, whom would it attack? In other words, Sui Yuanliang had been seeking death. You've inflicted this fate upon yourselves. Ling Han said with a shake of his head. He hadn't imagined that Sui Yuanliang would actually die by his own hands. Even he felt slightly dissatisfied by this conclusion. He lashed out without mercy, killing all of the remaining disciples from the Dragon Universe Palace. Father! Ling Jinxue called. He was slightly dazed as he gazed at his father, and his colorful imaginations of Ling Han naturally crumbled into ashes. Right now, he had to accept this mighty and powerful father. Ling Han dashed over, pulling his son into a tight embrace. Ling Jinxue was slightly flustered. He had never been embraced by a man before, especially a man he had just met. However, after a short while, he immediately felt the deep emotions of Ling Han's embrace. Tears involuntarily welled up in his eyes. Father, he called again. His voice was filled with emotion and admiration. Ever since he could remember things, he had never met Ling Han. His only impression of Ling Han was created through the descriptions given by Helian Xuanxue. He had once grumbled, he had once been confused, and he had once felt aggrieved. However, after beginning to cultivate, he had buried all of these emotions deep in his heart. At this moment, a feeling of familial affection finally erupted without restraint. Ling Han lightly patted Ling Jinshue's back. At the same time, he channeled the source power of wood, helping his son expel the poison from his body. This was naturally an easy task. Ling Jinshue had only been wounded by a dividing soul tier cultivator, so his wounds naturally wouldn't pose much challenge to Ling Han. Moreover, Ling Han could utilize his source powers of heaven and earth, so it wasn't long before he expelled all of the poison from his son's body, and healed all of his wounds. However, Ling Jinshue had suffered severe wounds, after all, so he wouldn't be able to fully recover in such a short period of time. "Let's go to my place first," Wenren said, interrupting at just the right moment. His suggestion naturally won everyone's approval. They all returned to the Wenren clan. As for Wenren Tang, no one paid any heed to him. They didn't even spare him as much as a glance. How could Ling Han, the Empress, and the others pay any heed to such a measly person? Meanwhile, Wenren felt it beneath him to deal with such matters. He had made the right move and taken the right gamble, and this had allowed him to instantly turn the tables. After arriving at the Wenren clan, Wenren arranged their living quarters. Meanwhile, the disciples of the Dragon Universe Palace were all captured by Ling Han. With him using his divine sense to observe the surroundings, these people were naturally unable to flee. Those who deserved death were killed, and those who deserved punishment had their cultivation crippled. Ling Han wasn't a bloodthirsty person. He understood how to act with reason. With their support, Wenren Shuang naturally inherited the position of clan leader without any problem. In fact, Ling Han even gifted him several alchemical pills, helping him directly reach the Genesis tier. However, this also came with a side effect. That was, Wenren Shuang was now stripped of any chance of improvement. He could only stay at the Genesis tier forever. To Wenren Shuang, however, this was already good enough. This was because with his cultivation talent, it had almost been impossible for him to reach the Genesis tier in the first place. Wenren was extremely intelligent, and he immediately organized an inheritance ceremony for his younger brother. At the same time, he invited Ling Han and the others to attend this ceremony. He believed that after doing this, the nearby forces most likely wouldn't dare to target the Wenren clan in the future. Because he was afraid of the Four Seas Palace, Ling Han put on some disguise. Otherwise, when he arrived at the Heavenly Saint Palace, perhaps the people from the Four Seas Palace would already be waiting for him there. Huh? Where's Wenren? The ceremony was about to begin, yet Wenren surprisingly had yet to arrive. Ling Jinshue couldn't help but find this strange. A mysterious smile spread across Wenren Shuang's face, and he said, "Brother Jinshue, you'll find out soon." How mysterious. What in the world are you playing at? Ling Jinshue murmured. He had been recuperating in the Black Tower for the past few days, which was equivalent to thousands of years in the Black Tower. Thus, he had naturally made a full recovery already. He had severed heaven and earth when advancing to the severing mundane tier, yet he had also ground to a halt after reaching the fourth severance. With Ling Han's abundant amount of cultivation resources, he now had hopes of reaching the fifth severance. At this moment, a beautiful woman walked over, and stopped behind Ling Jinshue. Ling Jinshue didn't pay any attention at first, yet the woman surprisingly didn't leave after stopping behind him. He found this especially strange, and he couldn't help but turn around, and ask, "Miss, why are you standing behind me?" The woman clasped her hands behind her back with a smile, and said, "Brother Jinshue, is this your attitude towards someone who shared adversity with you?" Huh? This voice is so familiar. Ling Jinshue was slightly dazed as he stared at her. After a moment, he suddenly exclaimed, "Why, you're Wenren." "It's Wenren, not Wenren," the woman said with a smile. "In the past, my brother was too young, and was unable to deal with clan matters, so the elders in the clan disguised me as a male so that I could support the hope of the main branch of the clan. After so long, I've almost forgotten that I'm a female as well." Ling Jinshue couldn't help but feel respect. For the sake of her brother and clan, this woman had made such a huge sacrifice. she was deserving of his respect. Lady Wenren, I'm impressed, he said with sincerity. Wenren Yu smiled, and said, call me by my name. I can also call you by your name, right? Indeed, Ling Jinxue replied. He didn't think much about this. Not far away, Ling Han and Helian Xuanxue were far more understanding of this exchange. This girl has feelings for Jinxue, Helian Xuanxue said with a slightly proud expression. Her son was well received by women, so she was naturally overjoyed as well. But doesn't Jinxue like Shuang? Now that another person has suddenly appeared, will it cause trouble? Zhu Xian'er asked. They had all heard Ling Han talking about how Ling Jinxue was head over heels for Chen Shuang. Ling Han pondered for a moment before smilingly saying, it's no problem. Let the two of them grow closer, and this will also stimulate that girl. She's always so airhead, so isn't she delaying the fourth generation of the Ling clan? However, the Empress, Li Sikan, and the others didn't think that the airhead Chen Shuang would understand the situation. After all, hadn't the granddaughter of Celestial King Jiuhua pursued Ling Jinxue before as well? Why hadn't that girl shown any signs of jealousy? Perhaps she hadn't been stimulated enough? Ling Han pondered this. However, he didn't want to expose this in a forthright manner. Instead, he wanted Chen Shuang to discover this by herself. After Wenren Shuang became the clan leader, many people came to offer their congratulations. They all heard that the Dragon Universe Palace had been destroyed, and they naturally attributed this to elites from the Heavenly Saint Palace. Thus, they naturally didn't dare to underestimate the Wenren clan. This allowed the Wenren clan to feel extremely proud from top to bottom. Their new clan leader had only just ascended this position, and there were already so many powerful clans coming over to congratulate them. In the future, their development would naturally be smooth as well. Prosperity was just around the corner. After dealing with all the other matters, Ling Han waved his hand, and set off with everyone else for the Heavenly Saint Palace. Wenren Yu naturally set off with them as well. She had made a promise with Ling Jinxue, so she would also join the Heavenly Saint Palace, and become an external disciple. Father, this is the Cold Moonlight Sun sword, Ling Jinxue said as he retrieved a sword, handing it over to Ling Han. Ling Han accepted it, and held the sword hilt in his right hand. Meanwhile, he used his left hand to lightly stroke the blade of the sword. He was slightly curious. This was a sword that Sui Yuanliang had been intent on obtaining, even if that meant offending the Heavenly Saint Palace. Just what was so special about it? Wang. His hand stroked the blade, causing it to lightly shudder. It was as if the sword were murmuring. This sword is extraordinary. However, perhaps only Sui Yuanliang knew its history, Ling Han said. He retrieved Sui Yuanliang's spatial god tool, saying, let's look through his belongings. Perhaps we can find some information. Chapter 2177, Great Reversing Yin and Yang. Ling Han entered the Black Tower, where time flowed 100,000 times faster than in the outside world. In just a few hours of real time in the outside world, he had already examined all of the information left by Sui Yuanliang. Because Sui Yuanliang hadn't anticipated facing any dangers, he had indeed left a lot of clues in his spatial god tool. Great Reversing Celestial King. Great Reversing Yin and Yang Sword. Great Reversing Celestial Technique, Ling Han murmured to himself. When he opened his eyes again, he had already grasped all of Sui Yuanliang's knowledge. As it turns out, this is actually a 7-star pseudo-celestial tool and the secondary sword to the Great Reversing Yin and Yang Sword, Ling Han explained to his lovers and son. However, being a 7-star pseudo-celestial tool isn't the most impressive thing about this sword. Instead, one can use this sword to find the Great Reversing Yin and Yang Sword. Moreover, the Great Reversing Yin and Yang Sword is a celestial tool, and even the Great Reversing Yin and Yang Technique, the Great Reversing Celestial King's cultivation technique, is sealed inside this sword. What kind of existence was the Great Reversing Celestial King? The Empress asked. Both might be celestial kings, but how could a fifth heaven celestial king compare to a ninth heaven celestial king? Their standard was extremely high now, so those under the fifth heaven, sixth heaven, or even seventh heaven wouldn't be viewed very highly by them. Only those at the eighth heaven or ninth heaven could be regarded as freakish. Ling Han paused for a moment before saying, should probably start from the beginning. The great reversing celestial king is someone with many stories. If one wants to become a celestial king, they definitely need to possess immense talent. After all, even king tiers are unable to become celestial kings. However, there are always exceptions in this world. During his earlier years, the great reversing celestial king only possessed ordinary talent, and no one believed that he could reach the severing mundane tier. However, even though he stumbled and struggled, he still managed to ascend to the severing mundane tier. Afterward, no one believed that he could reach the fifth severance, yet after obtaining a rare treasure, he was able to complete this feat. In summary, he struggled through each cultivation level, but he was always able to come across great fortune, allowing him to reach perfection in each cultivation level. Those of the same generation as him were either far superior in cultivation level, or they died after failing to resist their immortal's tribulation. However, he was always able to just barely break through when the immortal's tribulation started to threaten his life. Interestingly, his bumpy path didn't stop him from becoming a celestial king. Moreover, he became a ninth heaven celestial king. In the beginning, the great reversing celestial king wasn't prominent among the celestial kings. However, after creating the great reversing cultivation technique, he came from behind to surpass all others, becoming the ruler of heaven and earth in that generation. But Ling Han's expression suddenly became strange. But what? The others all asked in curiosity. But the great reversing celestial king eventually became a woman, Ling Han revealed. What do you mean? The others asked in confusion. The great reversing celestial king had originally been a man, yet he always believed that he should have been a woman. However, even though celestials can transform their bodies, they're unable to genuinely reverse yin and yang. Yet, the great reversing celestial technique that he created could reverse yin and yang, ultimately allowing him to become a woman. He became a genuine woman, Ling Han said in a leisurely voice. Everyone was astonished. Something like this was possible? The great reversing yin and yang sword also possesses this ability. For those who are struck by this sword, men will become women, and women will become men. However, since they haven't genuinely practiced the great reversing yin and yang cultivation technique, this transformation will only last for a limited time, Ling Han said. So fun. So fun. Hu Niu said as she clapped her hands. Niu wants this sword. After hearing this story, it was clear that the great reversing celestial king was genuinely an extremely interesting person. Heh. Ling Han tossed the cold moonlight sun sword to his son, saying, since you obtained this sword, it's up to you whether you obtain the great reversing celestial king's cultivation technique and divine sword or not. Ling Jinxue accepted the sword, and placed it in his spatial god tool with a nod, saying, I'll decide when I have the chance. Using the transference portals, they then set off for the Heavenly Saint Palace. After arriving at Red Blossom Village, Ling Han drew all of his lovers into the Black Tower. He was going to become a student to learn that omnipresent technique, and his goal was extremely clear. Thus, it was better for his lovers to cultivate in the Black Tower. Because of this, only 4 people remained when they arrived before the Heavenly Saint Palace: Ling Han, Ling Jinxue, Chen Shuangshuang, and Wenren Yu. From the foot of the mountain up, everything belonged to the Heavenly Saint Palace. Outsiders were strictly forbidden from entering, and there was a gigantic formation enveloping the entire sect. From the outside, one could only see a hazy mountain range that was hidden amid clouds and mists. Nothing could be seen clearly. If one possessed a token of the Heavenly Saint Palace, they could ignore this formation, and directly fly inside. If one tried to forcefully barge in without a token, they would be immediately crushed by the might of the formation. Of course, this was unless one was as powerful as a celestial king. Thus, if outsiders wanted to enter the Heavenly Saint Palace, they had to pass through the large gates at the foot of the mountain. There were people standing guard here, and only those who were granted permission could enter. Initially, Qin Shuangshuang and Ling Jinxue could have entered without any problems. However, because there were two outsiders in Ling Han and Wenren, they didn't enter the sect directly. Instead, they went to the large gates together. Our respects to senior sister Chen and senior brother Ling. The four disciples guarding the gate bowed and spoke in greeting when they saw Qin Shuangshuang and Ling Jinxue. All four of them were at the severing mundane tier. However, they were only at the first severance. Moreover, they were all far older than Qin Shuangshuang and Ling Jinxue. They had reached the severing mundane tier earlier, but because they weren't talented, they were still unable to take that next step. Thus, they could only remain external disciples who guarded the gate. When they saw core disciples such as Qin Shuangshuang and Ling Jinxue, they naturally had to pay their respects. What was important in the sect wasn't age. Rather, it was strength and talent. Ling Jinxue nodded in acknowledgement. He then pointed at Ling Han and Wenren and said, "These two are potential talents that senior sister Chen and I discovered during our adventures. We especially brought them back to introduce to the sect, so help them get registered." Understood, the four external disciples said with a nod. There was indeed such a tradition in the sect. Whenever disciples went out to adventure and train, they would keep an eye out for cultivation talents to bring back and examine. If they passed the examinations, they would be accepted into the sect. If they didn't pass, however, they would naturally be sent back wherever they came from. In reality, most disciples had joined like this. In fact, some disciples had even been personally recruited by the elders and protectors of the sect. For example, there might be a cultivation ceremony in some place, and those who managed to shine would be recruited by all kinds of powerful sections. If they didn't send elders, protectors, or ascending origin tier elites and celestial kings, how could they possibly snatch these outstanding talents? After registering their information, Ling Han and Wenren were easily let through by the four external disciples. In any case, the following examinations wouldn't be their responsibility. They had already finished their job. Ling Han and the others entered the sect, only to see a winding, serpentine mountain path. On the sides of this path were dense bushes consisting of flowers and peculiar plants that were radiating with a divine glow. In the distance, there were also many pagodas and abodes that were faintly discernible. Sitting atop the mountain, it was as if they were hovering in the air. This was much like a celestial abode. Junior sister Chen. Immediately upon entering, they saw a young man arriving on a sword. He was wearing an azure robe, and his appearance was relatively handsome. "Senior brother Wang," Qin Shuangshuang said in greeting. Meanwhile, Ling Jinxue seemed slightly displeased, and he pursed his lips as he also greeted senior brother Wang. Ling Han immediately understood the situation. This senior brother Wang was definitely his son's rival in love. Even though Ling Han had no animosity with this senior brother Wang, who told him to fight for his future daughter-in-law, he definitely had to help his son. Only at this moment did this senior brother Wang shoot a sideways glance at Ling Jinxue, saying, "Oh, so junior brother Ling is also here. I didn't know that you had already been released by Grand Elder Jiuhua." Heh. His act of provocation was as clear as could be. Chapter 2178, Innumerable Love Rivals. This senior brother Wang was called Wang Liangchun, and he had entered the Heavenly Saint Palace earlier than Ling Jinxue and Qin Shuangshuang. He had also reached the fourth severance before them, and right now, he was cultivating toward the dividing soul tier. Once he reached this cultivation, even though he would still be a core disciple, his status would definitely rise by a significant amount. Qin Shuangshuang was a renowned beauty of the Heavenly Saint Palace, so even though she was airhead, and even though she had a strange hobby of being attracted to beautiful women, her beauty and cultivation talent were still able to win her many admirers. Wang Liangchun was one of them. "Heh, no need for senior brother Wang to worry," Ling Jinxue said in an emotionless voice. Since he knew that Wang Liangchun was a rival in love, he would naturally treat him with hostility. Wang Liangchun wore a faint smile, and said, "Oh, that's right, Lady Tu San is looking for junior brother Ling everywhere again." Ling Jinxue frowned upon hearing this. Lady Tu San was called Tu Hongying, and she was the granddaughter of Celestial King Jiuhua. For some reason, she had fallen in love with him at first sight. Moreover, she had loudly claimed that she would marry no one but him. This matter had startled even Celestial King Jiuhua, and he had even locked Ling Jinxue up in an attempt to make him yield. However, after 10,000 years, Ling Jinxue had still been resolute and unwilling to give in. In the end, Celestial King Jiuhua could only free him in exasperation. After all, he was a core disciple of the sect, and he hadn't committed any crimes, had he? Because of this, Celestial King Jiuhua ended up becoming extremely appreciative of Ling Jinxue. He believed that this young man was true to his heart, and he wouldn't give in to external forces. He was someone who could achieve greatness. As such, he encouraged Tu Hongying to continue pursuing him. "That's right. What's wrong with Lady Tu San? Junior brother, why can't you accept her feelings?" Qin Shuangshuang said in agreement. At this moment, Ling Jinxue truly wanted to vomit blood. In front of this airhead, his heart truly ached. He didn't want to speak. However, even though he didn't speak, Ling Han naturally wouldn't ignore this. He patted Wang Liangchuan's shoulder and said, "Senior brother Wang, right? Come, take me on a tour." As he said this, he forcefully dragged Wang Liangchun away. Wang Liangchun couldn't help but feel astounded. He was at the peak stage of the fourth severance, and he had even reached the barrier to the Yang soul. Once he opened his Yang soul, he was confident that he could definitely advance. However, before Ling Han, his strength was seemingly non-existent. Ling Han had easily patted his shoulder, and he had easily managed to drag him away. He couldn't resist at all. He looked at Ling Han, yet he couldn't discern his cultivation level no matter what. He felt like Ling Han was a towering mountain, a boundless sea, profound and unfathomable. Ling Han dragged Wang Liangchun away, saying that he wanted a tour of the sect. In reality, however, it was he who was dragging Wang Liangchun around. Only after several hours did he return to look for Ling Jinxue. However, he knew that such kind of help could only be used once. In the future, it was still up to Ling Jinxue himself. By the looks of it, he needed to give his son some special training. Once they returned, Ling Jinxue immediately brought Ling Han and Wenren to the Great Hall of the sect. This was where outsiders would have their cultivation talent and comprehension ability examined. Those who passed the examination could remain, while those who failed could only piss off. Wenren, an elder responsible for the examination, shouted. He was an Immortal Palace tier elite. As expected of an 8th Heaven Celestial King tier force. Even Immortal Palace tier elites had to lower themselves to such lowly tasks. If this were outside, Immortal Palace tier elites were powerful enough to found their own sects and become the ruler of a land. Wenren Tang was just about to walk over, yet 3 men coincidentally entered the hall at this moment. The man in front wore a bright and colorful robe, and he radiated with an aura of elegance and nobility. The 2 men following him were also dressed with dignity, and they also radiated with astonishing auras. However, it was surprising that the man in front was only at the 4th severance, while the 2 men behind him were at the Earth Soul. The weaker person is actually their leader? By the looks of it, this person definitely has a powerful background. Otherwise, how can he command 2 Earth Soul cultivators? "Oh, it's young Master Da," the Immortal Palace tier elder exclaimed. To Ling Han's surprise, he also stood up to bow slightly at the 4th severance cultivator. His background was truly powerful. At the very least, even Immortal Palace tier elites didn't dare to offend him. Young Master Da wore an expression of disdain, and when he swept his gaze across Ling Jinxue, he said, "Lord Duan, aren't you aware that the sect examination rules have already changed?" "What change?" The Immortal Palace tier elite wore a confused expression. He had always been responsible for these examinations, so if there were any changes, how could he not be aware? You should head over there, young Master Da said as he pointed at a nearby column. The Immortal Palace Tier Elite opened his mouth slightly. He instantly came to a realization. Young Master Da was purposefully making things difficult for him. Sure enough, the rumors weren't false. Young Master Da was currently pursuing Lady Tu San, yet Lady Tu San was head over heels in love with Ling Jinxue. This was something that everyone in the Heavenly Saint Palace knew. Thus, young Master Da was naturally extremely jealous, so he wanted to target Ling Jinxue everywhere that he could. However, even though young Master Da was also the descendant of a celestial king, because they were in the same sect, and because Ling Jinxue was held in high regard by celestial King Jiuhua, young Master Da naturally didn't dare to take things too far. However, making things difficult for those that Ling Jinxue had brought into the sect was definitely no trouble at all. Lord Duan had initially planned to examine Ling Han and Wenren using the examination for external disciples. However, the examination that young Master Da pointed at was the examination for true disciples. These examinations were as different as heaven and earth. In the Heavenly Saint Palace, disciples were divided into 4 levels. From the bottom to the top, they were external disciples, internal disciples, true disciples, and core disciples. By raising the examination from the level of external disciples to the level of true disciples, the chance of these people passing was naturally infinitesimally close to 0. After all, true disciples were all king tiers. Young Master Da, the Immortal Palace Tier Elite, was slightly troubled by this. If he helped young Master Da, what would happen if news of this got out? He would also be unable to bear the consequences. Don't worry, I've got your back, young Master Da said in an extremely arrogant voice. He casually threw a vial of alchemical pills at the Immortal Palace Tier Elite, saying, "This is a river of time pill. You've been stuck at the first secret for many years, and this alchemical pill can give you a sliver of a chance to advance to the second secret." The eyes of the Immortal Palace Tier Elite instantly lit up. He hurriedly caught the vial, and said, "Since young Master Da has promised, I naturally don't have anything to worry about." This was a naked and undisguised exchange. Ling Han quietly observed this, and a cold smile involuntarily tugged at the corners of his lips. Initially, he had only wanted to enter the Heavenly Saint Palace, after which he would use the Black Tower to enter their treasure storage. After that, he would then learn that omnipotent celestial technique. However, this young Master Da or whatnot was clearly trying to bully them. This caused him to become angry. "Yi Jinda, you're taking things too far." Ling Jinxue couldn't help but chide. Impudence, the 2 Earth Soul cultivators behind young Master Da roared in unison. "You actually dare to directly utter young Master Da's name? Kneel down and apologize." Young Master Da, or Yi Jinda, waved his hand, and said, "No need to lower yourselves to the same level as him. Who told me to have a 5th heaven celestial king tier ancestor? Does he have one? Ling Jinxue, I admit that I'm blatantly bullying you. But what are you going to do? Bite me?" Ling Jinxue shook in fury, yet Yi Jinda was already admitting his brazen shamelessness, so what else could he say? He was rendered speechless. Ling Han sighed in his mind. Although his son's cultivation talent wasn't weak, his ability to argue was far too weak. In the future, he definitely had to send his son to train with the large black dog. Even if he couldn't kill others with words, he could still at least learn how to deride others. He patted his son's shoulder and stepped forward to interrupt, saying, "Regardless of what examination it is, can we start now?" The Immortal Palace Tier Elder looked over to Yi Jinda, who gave a nod of approval. Only after receiving this approval did he nod and say, "Indeed." Ling Han smiled faintly, and said, "I'll go first." Chapter 2179, Heaven Ringing Stone. Yi Jinda naturally wouldn't care about whether Ling Han went first or Wenren Yu went first. He was simply making things difficult for them, and trying to disgust Ling Jinxue. He had no other option. He was doing everything he could to pursue Tu Hongying, yet he couldn't win her heart no matter what. Meanwhile, Ling Jinxue had easily won her heart without any effort, so how could he not feel extreme jealousy? Thus, he was going out of his way to bully and disgust Ling Jinxue. "Alright, then begin," the Immortal Palace Tier Elder said. His name was Duan Hyaming. Ling Han walked over to the column and placed his hand on it. This column was called the Heaven-Ringing Stone, and it was specially used to examine the aptitude of cultivators. If normal people placed their hands on this column, there would be no reaction at all. Only when one reached or surpassed the king tier would the Heaven-Ringing Stone let out a ring. Moreover, the higher one's aptitude, the louder and more vibrant this ring would be. The number of rings would also be greater. When Ling Jinxue had entered the Heavenly Saint Palace, he had triggered 9 long rings from the Heaven-Ringing Stone, with each ring reverberating through the entire Heavenly Saint Palace. It was because of this that he had been accepted as a true disciple. After advancing to the Severing Mundane tier, he had more so been elevated to the status of core disciple. If he could advance even further, and reach the 5th severance, he could even become a holy son. That would be a completely different status. At that time, even Yi Jianda wouldn't dare to target him anymore. This was because monarch tiers could definitely become celestial kings. Who dared to act wantonly before a future celestial king? A cold smile spread across Yi Jianda's face. He didn't believe that Ling Jinxue could bring 2 prodigies back so easily. Perhaps they were talented enough to become external disciples, but it would most likely be a challenge for them to even become internal disciples. As such, could they possibly become true disciples? The base requirement was for the Heaven-Ringing Stone to release a loud ring. 1 ring would suffice. Ling Han placed his hand on the Heaven-Ringing Stone, yet there was no reaction at all. Ha 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 ha. Yi Jianda instantly roared with laughter. Even though he didn't give a toss about Ling Han, he would definitely take any opportunity he could to deride Ling Jinxue. "Are you not going to hurry up and piss off?" the 2 Earth Soul Elite said. "Why so impatient? You need to have some patience," Ling Han said in a calm voice. He was naturally doing this on purpose. It looked as if he had placed his hand on the column, yet it was actually a tiny distance away from it. If one didn't pay attention, they wouldn't notice this at all. Yi Jianda immediately turned to Duan Hyaming and said, "Lord Duan, hurry up and shoo him away." Yi Jianda naturally couldn't treat Ling Han with any sort of patience. Duan Hyaming nodded before turning to Ling Han and saying, "Hurry up and piss off." "Heh, I know how to do many things, but I don't know how to piss off. Why don't you demonstrate it for me?" Ling Han said with a chuckle. "Impudence." Duan Hyaming roared in anger. Initially, he had only helped Yi Jianda because he had received a bribe from him. However, Ling Han was acting with such arrogance, and this made him feel genuine rage. He was at the Immortal Palace tier, and he was powerful enough to be regarded as an elite even in the celestial realm. Boom! He immediately lashed out, grabbing at Ling Han. Pa! There was a crisp slapping sound, and they all saw Duan Hyaming flying back in disarray. There was a bright red hand mark on his old face. At this moment, Yi Jianda and his 2 lackeys were all transfixed with shock. It was as if they had been rendered stupid. Meanwhile, Ling Jinxue and Wenren were completely unfazed. They had already witnessed Ling Han's godly power before, where he had even managed to rival a 5th secret elite. Thus, what could a measly 1st secret elite do? Their only fate was to be insta-killed. Duan Hyaming crawled up from the floor, holding his cheek with his right hand. His face was filled with shock and disbelief. Once Ling Han lashed out, he naturally knew that he was only at the Heaven Soul. However, it was exactly because of this that he was shocked. A measly Heaven Soul had actually sent him flying with a single slap. Was he hallucinating? Just what kind of freak was this? Boom! At this moment, Ling Han finally placed his hand on the Heaven-Ringing Stone. The stone column instantly lit up before releasing loud rings that reverberated through the heavens. 1 ring, 2 rings, 3 rings. When the stone column rang for the 3rd time, 7 ascending origin tier elites immediately flew over, landing in the hall. Their eyes were shining brightly as they gazed at Ling Han, and it was as if they were impatient to snatch him. This was a prodigy, and they wanted to take him as their disciple. 4 rings, 5 rings, 6 rings. At the 6th ring, there were already hundreds of ascending origin tier elites in the hall. Moreover, this number was steadily increasing. 7 rings, 8 rings, 9 rings. When the 9th ring sounded, there were already thousands of ascending origin tier elites in the hall. 10th ring, 11th ring, 12th ring. Wang. A terrifying aura emanated, paramount and unbounded. It was as if the heavenly Tao had descended. A figure appeared, with a peculiar ray of light around them. This was a celestial king. Everyone in the hall took a sharp breath. Ling Han had actually startled a celestial king. However, this only made sense. After all, that was 12 heavenly rings. In the entire history of the Heavenly Saint Palace, only a measly 300 people had triggered such a reaction before. Moreover, every single one of them had become a celestial king. Who didn't want to take such a disciple? However, the long and reverberant rings continued. 15th ring, 20th ring, 30th ring. Wang, wang, wang. One after another, several celestial kings descended. Moreover, the rays of peculiar light around their bodies also started to increase. The most powerful celestial king present was already at the 5th heaven. Heavens. This signified that even 5th heaven celestial kings wanted to take Ling Han as their disciple. Duan Haiming trembled in fear. He was done for. This was the end. He had actually picked on the disciple of a celestial king. It would be useless even if Yi Jianda tried to help him, would still suffer severe punishment. In fact, even Yi Jianda wouldn't be spared from punishment. He suddenly came to a realization. Ling Han had definitely done this on purpose. He had lured them to take the bait, egging them on to say many offensive things, and even causing him to lash out. Only then did he suddenly reveal his astounding natural talent, startling the celestial kings of the sect. However, what use was this realization? What was done was already done. He collapsed to the ground, feeling that his entire life was filled with gloom. However, Ling Han's performance had yet to conclude. 40th ring, 50th ring, 60th ring. At this moment, even 6th heaven celestial kings started to appear. After them, a 7th heaven celestial king also appeared in the hall. This person was the current palace leader of the Heavenly Saint Palace. Meanwhile, the only 8th heaven celestial king was the previous palace leader. He had already stepped down, and he was currently acting as a grand elder of the sect. During normal times, he wouldn't deal with any of the sect matters. 70th ring, 80th ring, 90th ring. After reaching the 90th ring, the long rings finally started to slow down, not appearing as hurried as before. 91, 95, 97, 98, 99. Finally, the long rings ground to a halt. The hall was filled with silence. Even the celestial kings were rendered speechless with shock. In the history of the Heavenly Saint Palace, only 279 people had triggered 20 rings from the heaven-ringing stone. Only 190 people had triggered 30 rings, and only one person had triggered 70 rings, the current palace leader. How many rings had the Grand Elder, the 8th Heaven Celestial King and previous palace leader of the Heavenly Saint Palace triggered? No one knew. Perhaps only he had surpassed the limit of 90 rings. Whoosh! A young man appeared, and he only looked to be 15 or 16 years old. However, he was radiating with a primitive aura, and it was as if he were an ancient beast instead of a human. Like an ancient beast that had lived for countless years, his small figure seemingly contained a colossal power that could annihilate heaven and earth. Our respects to the Grand Elder. Those below the rank of Celestial King all kneeled down in respect. In fact, even the Celestial Kings bowed slightly toward that youth. This youth was surprisingly the most powerful elite of the Heavenly Saint Palace. He was Emojua, an 8th heaven celestial king. He was also referred to as the Heavenly Saint Celestial King, and it was he who had founded the Heavenly Saint Palace. Everyone was astonished. Even the Heavenly Saint Celestial King had been startled by Ling Han. Emojua raised his hand, acknowledging their greetings. Even I could only trigger 83 rings from the heaven-ringing stone. Chapter 2180, Appointment. Everyone was stunned upon hearing this. Even the Heavenly Saint Celestial King had only caused the heaven-ringing stone to ring 83 times. Then just what did the 99 rings from Ling Han signify? Didn't this signify that he had the chance to become a paramount 9th heaven celestial king? At this moment, to say nothing of ascending origin tier elites and immortal palace tier elites, even celestial kings gazed at Ling Han with an expression of envy. 9 heaven celestial king. These were the paragons of heaven and earth. Emojua pondered for a moment. 90 rings signified that Ling Han had the talent to become a 9th heaven celestial king. Meanwhile, 99 rings signified that he could become one of the most powerful 9th heaven celestial kings. Most importantly, the heavenly Tao had its limits. The 9th heaven was the limit, so 99 rings was also the limit of the heaven-ringing stone. What if Ling Han's potential was even greater? In the past, the Heavenly Saint Celestial King had been a follower of the Rock Source Beast. He had a close relationship with the Rock Palace, so he also knew some secrets that other 8th heaven celestial kings didn't know. To his knowledge, there was still a genuinely paramount level above the level of 9th heaven celestial king. Heavenly Venerate. Heavenly Venerates had transcended above heaven and earth, yet the heaven-ringing stone wasn't transcendent above heaven and earth. Thus, it could only ring a maximum of 99 times. Even if Heavenly Venerates came, they could still only trigger 99 rings from the heaven-ringing stone. This was a limit imposed by heaven and earth. "Young man, what's your name?" Emojua asked in a friendly voice. He was naturally posing this question to Ling Han. Ling Han bowed in respect before saying, "This junior's name is Han Lin." He had changed his appearance, so he also changed his name as well. An emotional expression spread across Emojua's face, and he said, "I desire to take you as my disciple. However, my days here are limited, so there's not much that I can teach you. In any case, since such a prodigy has entered my heavenly saint palace, this must be the will of the heavens. Listen to my command. Han Lin can freely enter the Cloud Treasure Hall to comprehend Tao." Emojua's words were far too astonishing. What did he mean that his days were limited? He was a mighty 8th heaven celestial king, so who could force him to leave the heavenly saint palace? Moreover, he actually permitted Ling Han to freely enter the Cloud Treasure Hall to comprehend Tao? One had to realize that all of the heavenly saint palace's celestial techniques were stored there. In fact, even most celestial kings faced restrictions when entering the Cloud Treasure Hall. They were only allowed to comprehend a selected number of the celestial techniques. Indeed, Ling Han had the potential to become a 9th heaven celestial king in the future. However, this was only potential. The road to becoming a celestial king was a long and challenging one, and just how many people had fallen on this arduous path of growth? After allowing Ling Han to comprehend the secrets of the heavenly saint palace without restriction, what if he were captured by their enemies? Wouldn't that leak all of the heavenly saint celestial king's celestial techniques? Having powerful elites was only one of the reasons that a powerful force could remain prosperous and undying. Possessing unique and powerful celestial techniques was the other important reason. Even the palace leader of the heavenly saint palace was stunned, and he couldn't help but exclaim, "Venerable Master." Emojua waved his hand, and said, "Great calamity is about to befall heaven and earth." At that time, even the existence of the heavenly saint palace might be challenged. Cultivating good relationships can perhaps give the heavenly saint palace an extra sliver of a chance at survival. Upon hearing this, everyone was transfixed with shock. Even 7th heaven celestial kings were rendered speechless. Judging by Emojua's tone, he was seemingly extremely pessimistic about the future. Meanwhile, Ling Han came to a sudden realization. By leaving the Heavenly Saint Palace, Missouri Zhua was most likely heading off to resist the storm of darkness. This was also why there were always few celestial kings in the celestial realm. They would eventually all go to the border of the two realms to resist the storm of darkness. Mo Zhua had clearly witnessed the power of the force of darkness before, and it was because of this that he held such pessimism. Perhaps the next arrival of the storm of darkness would spell the end of the celestial realm. In the face of such great calamity, only heavenly venerates could ensure their survival. Thus, if Ling Han became a heavenly venerate, and if he lent a helping hand to the Heavenly Saint Palace, the Heavenly Saint Palace would then have a chance of survival. However, becoming a heavenly venerate was far too difficult. It was almost an impossible task. This was why Mo Zhua said there was only a sliver of a chance. Ling Han bowed in respect again. This celestial king possessed great wisdom. Just his resolve and magnanimity alone were deserving of his respect. Mo Zhua smiled faintly. He knew that Ling Han understood his intentions. With a tap of his feet, an 8-colored celestial light shone around him. When everyone came to their senses, he had already disappeared. The palace leader of the Heavenly Saint Palace pondered for a moment before saying, "I hereby appoint Han Lin as the Heavenly Will Elder. His status is only beneath mine, and he has the power to check all elders." Upon hearing this, everyone was stunned once again. A measly dividing soul tier cultivator could actually enjoy a status superior to the celestial kings? Who could accept this? However, Ling Han developed deep respect and admiration for this palace leader. Since Mo Zhua had already bestowed him with such great power, this palace leader decided to further push him along. In reality, trying to check and control all elders. The elders had to be willing to listen to him first. How could a measly dividing soul tier cultivator keep them in check? Thus, this position was in name only. It was simply a nice-sounding title. The celestial kings were naturally all extremely smart people, so they immediately understood the meaning behind all of this. As such, they didn't speak out in protest. After all, it was Mo Zhua who had decided to bestow Ling Han with such great power. Who dared to disrespect an 8th heaven celestial king? With everything said and done, there was naturally no reason for them to remain. They all left the hall. However, Duan Haiming had nowhere to go, so he could only look toward Ling Han pitifully. In terms of strength, Ling Han could defeat him in a single strike. In terms of status, Ling Han had more so become the Heavenly Will Elder, the leader of all elders. But what was he? However, Ling Han simply patted his shoulder and said, "I won't stay in the Heavenly Saint Palace forever, so I still need you to look after Ling Jinxue." Duan Haiming immediately nodded and said, "Yes, I understand." A relieved smile spread across his face. By saying this, it was clear that Ling Han didn't intend to punish him for his actions. Thus, he was naturally as delighted as could be. In any case, if he could become acquainted with the Heavenly Will Elder, what did it matter even if he became a slave or a servant? This was someone who could become a 9th heaven celestial king in the future. This was someone whom even the Heavenly Saint Celestial King wanted to cultivate a good relationship with. He naturally understood that Ling Han was only forgiving him because he wanted him to look after Ling Jinxue. As such, he would naturally complete this task to the best of his ability. Ling Han then turned to Yi Jinda, and there was a menacing glint in his eyes. Yi Jinda humped upon seeing this. Even though the palace leader and the Heavenly Saint Celestial King both viewed Ling Han in high regard, he was still only a dividing soul tier cultivator, after all. He was heaven knew how far away from becoming a genuine celestial king. As such, did he dare to target him? Of course, he didn't dare continue to target Ling Han either. After all, his status as the Heavenly Will Elder was truly quite frightening. "Let's go." He waved his hand and left with his two subordinates. He would find another chance to target Ling Jinxue in the future. Ling Han didn't stop him. He would help his son, but he definitely wouldn't do everything for his son. Without facing challenges and obstacles, how could he develop strength and tenacity? Right now, the most pressing matter was to increase the strength of his son. After all, he couldn't step forward to help every single time, could he? With him, the Heavenly Will Elder, standing guard, Wenren naturally passed the examination with no problem at all. Of course, this wasn't because Ling Han had opened a back door. Instead, this woman was truly talented enough to become a true disciple. Even Ling Han was slightly surprised by this. After completing the examination, Ling Han directly dragged Ling Jinxue into the Black Tower, where he would subject him to special training. No matter what, his son definitely had to become a 5th Severance Monarch tier. After learning about the dangers of trying to reach the 5th Severance, Helian Xuanxue tried to convince her husband and son to change their minds. If Ling Jinxue failed to reach the 5th Severance, his only fate would be death. Thus, she preferred her son to be mediocre, especially if that meant he could live on peacefully. However, Ling Jinxue was extremely resolute. With such a powerful father, even if he couldn't stand shoulder to shoulder with him, he still had to follow in his footsteps. He couldn't fall behind too much. He started to cultivate toward the 5th Severance. Chapter 2181, Planning for his son. Ling Jinxue worked hard on cultivation inside the Black Tower. All kinds of rare and valuable cultivation resources were funneled into him: high-level alchemical pills, dragon crystals, and all kinds of natural treasures. As long as he needed them, they would be immediately provided to him. One day passed in the outside world, and this was equivalent to a whopping 100,000 days in the Black Tower. Thus, in just 100 days in the outside world, Ling Jinxue had already reached the pinnacle of the 4th Severance. He could already feel the barrier to the 5th Severance. This was inevitable. Ling Han, Hun Yo, and the Empress had all reached the 5th Severance, so this allowed him to observe and learn from them all the time. He also possessed extraordinary talent himself, and he was able to utilize a boundless amount of cultivation resources. Thus, it would be strange if he couldn't feel the barrier to the 5th Severance. He started to calm his mind, preparing to take that critical step. Meanwhile, Ling Han stayed in the Cloud Treasure Hall all day every day, comprehending the celestial techniques of the Heavenly Saint Palace. Initially, he had only wanted that omnipotent cultivation technique. However, since Mo Zhua gave him permission to freely enter the Cloud Treasure Hall, he naturally wouldn't waste this opportunity. He investigated and comprehended all kinds of celestial techniques. I want to perfect the Fists of Fury, and create my own technique. Ling Han had a lofty ambition. Only the Tao that belonged to him was the most powerful Tao. That omnipotent technique was called the Heaven-Deceiving Technique, and this was an extremely mystical technique. Ling Han speculated that this technique hadn't been created by the Heavenly Saint Celestial King. Rather, he had most likely obtained it from some unknown place. This technique had most likely been created by a 9th Heaven Celestial King, or perhaps even a Heavenly Venerate. After reaching initial mastery of the Heaven-Deceiving Technique, one could conceal their aura, and appear like an ordinary mortal. After reaching great mastery, one could emit an aura of any cultivation level that they wanted. Of course, this aura could only be equivalent to, or lower than, their own cultivation level. For example, an immortal palace tier elite couldn't emit the aura of a celestial king. After reaching consummate mastery, one could truly deceive heaven and earth. They could emit any aura that they wanted, and they could even disguise themselves as a 9th Heaven Celestial King. As long as they didn't get into a conflict, no one would be able to see through them. It was as he practiced this heaven-deceiving technique that Ling Han continued to comprehend and investigate the other celestial techniques in the Cloud Treasure Hall. In the end, he sacrificed all of this to form his own unique Tao. Several days later, Ling Jinxue exited the Black Tower. He already possessed the confidence to reach the 5th Severance. Are you certain? Ling Han asked in a solemn voice. This was his son, so he naturally had to be extremely careful. He couldn't allow any accidents. Ling Jinxue wore a proud smile as he said, "Don't worry, father." Jinxue. Helian Xuanxue was still extremely worried. She had heard the Empress and Hunyo say that the fifth severance was extremely difficult to reach. Otherwise, there wouldn't have been so few celestial kings in the world. "Mother, I know what I'm doing," Ling Jinxue said in a confident voice. "All right, let's head off." Placing Ling Jinxue into the Black Tower, Ling Han left the Heavenly Saint Palace, and arrived at a desolate and uninhabited location. Meanwhile, Ling Jinxue continued to charge at the fifth severance inside the Black Tower. 2 days later. "Father, let me out!" Ling Jinxue shouted. A wild aura raged around his body. Ling Han nodded, and he released Ling Jinxue from the Black Tower with a single thought. Crack! There was a rumble of thunder, and a boundless number of dark clouds swept over, forming heavenly tribulation. Ling Jinxue naturally possessed a natural peach sealet was given to him by Hunyo. Even though the rock palace had been flattened, a large majority of their treasures had been left with Hunyo. This was the backup plan prepared by Long Yueshi because she believed in Ling Han. Ling Jinxue soared into the sky, actively flying toward his heavenly tribulation. Crack! 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 Devastating arcs of lightning continued to strike down. The fifth severance was far too important as it signified that one could definitely become a celestial king, thus, the tribulation that descended from heaven and earth would also be especially powerful, and perhaps even severe. Without a natural peach seal, one didn't need to dream about passing this tribulation. Half a day passed, and Ling Jinxue finally descended from the sky. He was drenched in blood, and countless bones of his had also been broken. However, he had ultimately passed the heavenly tribulation. A smile appeared on Ling Han's face. After reaching the fifth severance, his son's future would be bright and limitless. He tossed Ling Jinxue into the Black Tower to recuperate. Afterward, he started to head back to the Heavenly Saint Palace. The flow of time inside the Black Tower was far too quick, so when Ling Han arrived back at the Heavenly Saint Palace, Ling Jinxue had already recovered to his most powerful state. Ling Han spent some time condensing the celestial techniques that he had comprehended into a technique most suitable for his son. There was no sun and moon in the Black Tower, and time flew past them at an incredible speed. In the blink of an eye, tens of thousands of years had already passed. However, this was only 1 month in the outside world. Ling Jinxue's battle prowess truly reached the level of a monarch tier. Moreover, he could definitely rank in the top, even among monarch tiers. However, it was a shame that he was still unable to rival Ling Han. Compared to Hunyo and the Empress at the same stage of their cultivation, he was still slightly inferior. After all, Hunyo had been the successor of a 9th Heaven Celestial King tier force. Moreover, she also possessed the martial imprint of a 9th Heaven Celestial King. Meanwhile, the Empress had shared some of Ling Han's fortune, allowing her to obtain an unimaginable amount of natural treasures. To say nothing else, both women had refined a source power of heaven and earth. Even so, Ling Jinxue was still extremely satisfied. Natural peach seals were far too rare. In fact, if he'd only relied on the Heavenly Saint Palace, he would have never been able to obtain one. Thus, he was already surprised and ecstatic that he could reach the fifth severance. Right now, Ling Jinxue possessed the ability to become a holy son of the Heavenly Saint Palace. Ling Jinxue ended his cultivation, but he didn't immediately report his breakthrough to the Heavenly Saint Palace. Instead, he continued to temper his cultivation. In the near future, the sect would host a grand competition between core disciples, and he wanted to make a name for himself there. In the beginning, Wenren had still been extremely reserved. Recently, however, she became increasingly bold, not hiding her love for Ling Jinxue anymore. This gave Ling Jinxue a huge headache. If he rejected her, he would be hurting her too much. After all, they had gone through adversity together. If he didn't reject her, however, that would also be far too troublesome. More importantly, he was afraid that Chen Shuangshuang would misunderstand. Even though he had indirectly told her that he loved someone else, Wenren didn't mind this at all. She had said that it was normal for a prodigy such as him to have several lovers. Moreover, Ling Han was also adding fuel to the flames, continually creating opportunities for them to be together. As a result, the two of them almost never left each other. Tap, tap, tap. Qin Shuangshuang suddenly ran over. "Uncle, the behavior of those two is truly outrageous," she said with her hands on her hips. There was displeasure on her face, and she continued, "They're not cultivating in earnest, and they're always sticking to each other. What's the meaning of this?" Ling Han chuckled, and asked, "Whom are you talking about?" "Your son, of course," Qin Shuangshuang said with a huff. "What's with that woman? Does she not have her own abode? She doesn't return even at night. Does she have no shame? What's wrong? Have they interfered with you?" Ling Han asked with a smile. "Tisk, I'm only worried about junior brother Ling," Qin Shuangshuang said with a humph. Ling Han took a sip of tea before saying, "Jinxue is also at the age where he needs to get married. Since the two of them have a good relationship, we should let them become husband and wife." "We can't do that." Qin Shuangshuang immediately jumped up, and said, "Haven't you seen junior brother Ling's expression of unwillingness whenever he's with that woman? Uncle, you can't mismatch two people." Ling Han spread his hands, and asked, "Then what can I do?" Qin Shuangshuang was simple-minded, so she couldn't help but scratch her head in worry. Ling Han smiled, and said, "I have an idea." Qin Shuangshuang's eyes lit up, and she asked, "What idea?" "Why don't you get married to Jinxue?" Seeing that Qin Shuangshuang was just about to jump up, Ling Han hurriedly waved his hands, and signaled for her to calm down, saying, "A fake marriage, of course, to shoo away all of those other lovers. That way, your junior brother Ling can also cultivate in peace." Chapter 2182, From Make-Believe to Reality. But, Qin Shuangshuang was clearly a little hesitant. "So you're not willing to help junior brother Ling?" Ling Han said slowly. "Sigh, and you say that you're a loyal friend. You clearly just said that for show." Qin Shuangshuang immediately retorted, "Who was saying that for show?" "Fine, then I'll get married to him." Ling Han nodded, and said, "All right, then I'll organize this matter. You can prepare to become the bride." "A fake one," Qin Shuangshuang stressed. "Yes, a fake one," Ling Han replied. Qin Shuangshuang left, and the Empress and the others walked out from inside. When they became bored in the Black Tower, they would come out for a walk. However, they wouldn't be seen by others. "Husband, you're truly so evil," Shui Yanyu said. She had been a teacher in the past, so she had a strong sense of righteousness. Ling Han sighed, and said, "There's nothing else I can do." Who told her to be so naive? Who told my stupid son to be so bad at expressing himself? Who's a stupid son? Helian Xuanxue asked in displeasure. In a mother's eyes, their son was naturally always the best. Ling Han laughed, and said, "Anyhow, if this girl hadn't had feelings for Jinxue, would she have become jealous and run over here to complain? Would she have agreed to the fake marriage to save Jinxue?" "That's true," the women said with a nod. Qin Shuangshuang was simply airhead, so she hadn't realized her feelings for Ling Jinxue. However, she had barely hesitated before agreeing to the fake marriage with Ling Jinxue. This was already proof enough of her love for Ling Jinxue. If it had been someone else, would they have agreed? Ling Han chuckled in anticipation. Once the wedding was held, it would become real even if it was fake. We'll seize this opportunity to create some more commotion. He spread news of this wedding, and the entire Heavenly Saint Palace instantly knew that Ling Jinxue was about to marry Qin Shuangshuang. What? Ling Jinxue, the bridegroom, only learned of this from someone else. He hurriedly ran over to Ling Han, asking, "Father, what in the world is going on? Perhaps you don't want to marry your senior sister Qin?" Ling Han said with a smile. Ling Jinxue instantly became shy and bashful. He naturally wanted to marry her. However, this was far too sudden, and Chen Shuangshuang didn't even know about his feelings yet. Why was she suddenly going to marry him? Moreover, he was the bridegroom, so why did he only learn of this wedding just now? I do want to, but... Ling Han laughed, and said, no need for buts. Just wait to be a bridegroom. Ling Jinxue, come out here. Right at this moment, a loud shout suddenly traveled over from outside. Ling Jinxue ran out, only to see Wang Liangchun standing at the door. He appeared extremely angry. Senior brother Wang, what's wrong? He asked. Wang Liangchun humphed, and said, I forbid you from marrying junior sister Chen. Ling Jinxue scoffed, and said, firstly, you have no relationship with me. Secondly, you have no relationship with senior sister Chen. What right do you have to forbid this marriage? Because you're not worthy of her. Wang Liangchun said with arrogance. With your measly strength, how can you be worthy of junior sister Chen? Then are you worthy? Naturally. Ling Jinxue gestured for him to come over, saying, then please show me, senior brother Wang. You're seeking punishment. Wang Liangchun said in disdain. He had reached the fourth severance millions of years before Ling Jinxue, and right now, he had already tempered the fourth severance to a consummate state. He was only a step away from advancing to the dividing soul tier. In other words, his battle prowess was naturally superior to Ling Jinxue's. Since you're asking for humiliation, I'll satisfy your request. With a tap of his feet, Wang Liangchun instantly soared into the sky. Come, a battle in the sky. Ling Jinxue's fighting spirit soared. After advancing to the fifth severance, he still had yet to fight with anyone else. He only knew that he was far more powerful than before, but he didn't know just how powerful he was. With a tap of his feet, he also leaped into the sky. Senior brother Wang, please, he said in a courteous voice. This was because he was confident, so he didn't need to act in a reckless or sinister manner. Wang Liangchun sneered, and said, I'll make you submit within 100 moves. With a flash, he charged toward Ling Jinxue, unleashing a powerful celestial technique as he did so. Ling Jinxue replied with a punch. Pung! In a single exchange, Wang Liangchun was sent stumbling back. He retreated several hundred kilometers. Wah! Wang Liangchun violently coughed a mouthful of blood, an expression of shock and disbelief on his face. How was his opponent so powerful? In fact, even Ling Jinxue hadn't expected this result. He only knew that he was definitely more powerful than Wang Liangchun. However, he hadn't expected to achieve victory in a single exchange. Moreover, he had done so in a crushing manner. Monarch tiers were naturally more powerful than Emperor tiers, and it was when they became fifth severance cultivators that their advantage would be the most obvious. If they were both at the Yang Soul, even though Ling Jinxue would still be more powerful, he definitely wouldn't be able to wound Wang Liangchun in a single strike. Wang Liangchun took a sharp breath, and loudly asked, what kind of celestial pill did you take? Ling Jinxue laughed, and said, Senior brother Wang, thank you for letting me win. Victory had been decided, so there was naturally no need to continue this battle. Moreover, he now understood just how much more powerful than his opponent he was. I haven't lost yet. Wang Liangchun shouted, clearly unwilling to give up. He immediately tensed up and charged at Ling Jinxue again. You can't even see the gulf between us, so how can you possibly catch me? Ling Jinxue said. He tapped his finger at Wang Liangchun. Pung! Wang Liangchun was sent flying again. He was still unable to block a single strike from Ling Jinxue. The advantage of a fifth severance cultivator over a fourth severance cultivator was like the advantage of a dividing soul tier cultivator over a severing mundane tier cultivator. It was far too great. Wang Liangchun finally understood the insurmountable gulf between him and Ling Jinxue. He could only glare at Ling Jinxue before turning around to leave. Just like he had said before, fighting any more would only be seeking humiliation. Ling Jinxue descended from the sky, and excitedly said to Ling Han, Father, I'm actually this powerful. Ling Han laughed and said, "Your journey is still long, so if you become content with your current situation, the gates to the Celestial King tier might not open up for you." "I understand." Ling Jinxue immediately suppressed his feeling of excitement. Afterward, several more displeased senior brothers and junior brothers visited to challenge Ling Jinxue. However, they were all easily defeated. Who in the Severing Mundane tier was his opponent? Even if young soul cultivators challenged him, Ling Jinxue could still rival them. It was just that he couldn't defeat them. He won more and more battles, and this also caused the sect to view him in higher regard. In the end, they finally realized that he had become a monarch tier. This caused commotion to sweep through the Heavenly Saint Palace. Monarch tiers were destined to become celestial kings. Even in the Heavenly Saint Palace, such a prodigy would only appear once every tens of billions of years. Because of this, Ling Jinxue was also elevated to the status of Holy Sun. His future path would definitely be bright and limitless. With Ling Han's earlier notification, Tu Hongying naturally wasn't able to cause a fuss during the wedding either. This allowed Ling Jinxue and Chen Shuangshuang's wedding to proceed smoothly. A day after the wedding, Ling Jinxue brought Chen Shuangshuang over to pay respects to his parents. During this process, Ling Han's daughter-in-law shot a sharp glare at him. It was clear that even though she was airhead, she had finally realized that she had been tricked by Ling Han. However, what was done was already done. Last night, she hadn't been able to resist Ling Jinshua's stubborn coaxing, and she had also been slightly muddle-headed thanks to the large amount of alcohol that she had consumed. In the end, she had become one with that bastard. Ultimately, it was still because her father-in-law Ling Han was far too shameless. He had actually tricked her into this result. Chapter 2183, Leaping the Dragon's Gate. After Ling Jinxue and his wife got married, they left the Heavenly Saint Palace, firstly to enjoy their married life, secondly for training, and thirdly also because they would keep being harassed if they stayed in the sect. Even if Ling Jinxue had already married, there were still a great many female disciples willing to pounce on him. He was a man, after all, so wouldn't it be very normal that he would have a good number of lovers? And Chen Shuangshuang was unable to chase away all the pestering bugs either, as there would be people expressing goodwill to her. Hence, the young couple decided to just leave. What they did not see, their hearts would not grieve over. After several hundred to over 1,000 years, all this would naturally be appeased. Ling Han, too, prepared to leave. He had already cultivated the heaven-deceiving technique to small accomplishment level, and was sure that he would be able to attain great accomplishment not much later, but to reach consummate level, he would still have to spend a boundless amount of time. Several days later, Ling Han received a piece of news. Dragon's Gate Mountain? Leaping over the Dragon's Gate? This was the newest information that the scouts of the Heavenly Saint Palace had obtained. Rich and powerful great sects like the Heavenly Saint Palace naturally had innumerable feelers which they extended to all corners of the celestial realm. Their main purpose was to monitor if there were any changes in authority in the many great forces and important matters of the like. Additionally, the appearance and opening of ancient sites was also within their range of monitoring. After all, some ancient sites were extremely important, and could even alter the destiny of a great sect. Who knows what the hell this Dragon's Gate Mountain is? Ling Han flipped through the information, and became increasingly surprised as he continued reading, also revealing an expression of pleasant surprise. What Dragon's Gate Mountain? Hunyo asked curiously. Ling Han nodded, and said, "This is really a place where the carp leaps the Dragon's Gate." According to the information, this Dragon's Gate Mountain is not located in the celestial realm, but rather floats in the void. It will only appear once every epoch, and if one is able to reach the summit, and leap over the Dragon's Gate, it would result in a complete transformation. Transforming into a dragon? Hunyo continued to ask. The dragon is the most powerful immortal beast, and turning into a dragon is only a way of putting it, not that you would really transform into an immortal dragon, Ling Han replied with a smile. The climbing of Dragon's Gate Mountain only depends on willpower, and not on natural talent. If your willpower is not strong enough, no matter how prodigious you are, even a monarch tier could not possibly complete the climb. And if you have an iron willpower, you could still undergo a complete transformation even if you are an idiot, and become a dragon in a single stroke, opening the doors to a supreme path of cultivation. Most importantly, it can allow one to deliver a severance to the heaven and earth. Ling Han exclaimed excitedly. Helian Xuanxue and the other women were all stuck at peak stage Genesis tier, and hesitated, not daring to take a single step further. Even if they were to sever the mundane, their greatest obsession would definitely be the love they felt towards Ling Han. However, their aptitude was not adequate, and they could not strike a severance to the heaven and earth to take their step into the realm of celestials. Thus, before their lifespan dried up, or they reached the point where the immortals' tribulation became too serious, they would definitely not make the move to advance to the severing mundane tier. However, as long as they could leap over the dragon's gate, they could greatly transform themselves, and improve their aptitude of cultivation. Delivering a strike to the heaven and earth to enter into the realm of celestials naturally would become possible, and the chances were extremely high at that. More importantly, the requirement for climbing the Dragon's Gate mountain and leaping over the Dragon's Gate was not aptitude, natural talent, strength, or cultivation level, but merely pure determination. We will definitely succeed. The women were all confident, and were also incredibly determined. They had fallen too far behind Ling Han, and had to grab hold of this chance. Strange. Ling Han suddenly faltered. According to the information, the Dragon's Gate mountain would only appear once every epoch, and is a genuine heaven-defying great opportunity that would alter your destiny, but from the last time it appeared until now, it has only been 9 trillion years. One epoch was 12 trillion years. Even if there is deviation, it should not go so far as deviation for 3 trillion years. The Empress nodded as well. Just how long was 3 trillion years? If there was a deviation of tens of millions of years, or even 100 million years, that would still be acceptable. After all, the basic figure was too large. A thought flashed in Ling Han's mind, and he said, unless this is a consciousness of the heaven and earth wanting to nurture more prodigies to stand against the invasion of the force of darkness? Everyone nodded. The heavenly Tao channeled with its own logic. For example, when a cultivator broke through, a heavenly tribulation would descend, and that was the heaven and earth working on maintaining a balance, not allowing someone who was too strong to appear, disturbing the channeling of the heavenly Tao. And now, the heaven and earth felt a great threat to its existence, so the heaven and earth would appropriately make some changes, such as allowing the Dragon's Gate mountain to appear ahead of time, and that was the heaven and earth moving as a self-protective measure. However, even the heaven and earth is compelled to make such drastic changes. It can be imagined just what kind of great threat it has sensed this time round. The pressure is so great that it did not hesitate to make a great change to the channeling of heavenly Tao. Ling Han looked worried. Perhaps, the next time the force of darkness fully invades, it will be considerably sooner than we have predicted. The Empress nodded. What we need the most now is time. Even with the 100,000x time acceleration effects of the Black Tower, it was not enough. The more their cultivation levels progressed, the slower their advancement would become, especially after they advanced into Celestial King tier. Using a whole epoch to advance to the next heaven was nothing rare. Even if the force of darkness would only invade fully after another 1 million years, that would only be 1 trillion years for Ling Han, less than 1/10 of a whole epoch. Perhaps Ling Han could have become a 9th heaven celestial king by then, but a heavenly venerate? It'd be difficult. Since even the heaven and earth has been compelled to make changes, the leap over the Dragon's Gate this time would definitely have great benefits. We have to take hold of this opportunity. Ling Han immediately came to a decision. To give the women the ability of delivering a strike to the heaven and earth to advance into the realm of celestials, Ling Han had to take this detour. What more when it would also be greatly beneficial for himself, the Empress, Hunyo, and the others. There's not much time, or I would want to make a trip back to the Eastern Celestial Realm, and bring everyone else with me, Ling Han said. The everyone else he was speaking of was naturally referring to the veterans, that he had brought with him from the small world, such as his cousin, the peerlessly talented maniac, Gu Fenghua, the white-robed sword king, Xinzhong Chen, and so on. The Dragon's Gate mountain would not be there forever. The time it stayed every time was indefinite, but it would not be too long before it would rip a hole into the void, and leave once more. Who knows where Jinxue and Shuangshuang have gone off to? Hopefully, they would have gotten the news as well. After the decision was made, they immediately set out. It was not just them, but the entire celestial realm that had erupted in a commotion. Without caring if they could make it in time, countless people rushed towards the Dragon's Gate mountain. Even celestial kings were not exempted. This was truly a natural mystery realm, a test from the heaven and earth, and a blessing from the heaven and earth. Even if they were elites, they could still get rid of the impurities in their bodies after leaping over the Dragon's Gate, and improve in all aspects, advancing in the direction of heavenly Tao. It was probably only ninth heaven celestial kings that would have completely no use for this. The heaven and earth would definitely not allow anyone to rise above regulations, so ninth heaven celestial kings could not possibly be allowed to advance one step further, and cross over into heavenly venerable tier. Of course, for a heavenly venerate, this definitely was also a meaningless matter. Xiao, xiao, xiao. Wang, wang, wang. Multiple figures shot out of Heavenly Saint Palace, and the transference portal of Red Blossom Village was also endlessly flickering with light. It was practically channeling without stopping, delivering wave after wave of people. Though it wasn't able to cross the boundaries of heavenly realms, it could still save a great amount of journeying time, and allow people to arrive at the boundaries of Rock Heaven. Ling Han and his group also arrived at Red Blossom Village. To increase their pace, only Hu Niu and the Empress were by his side, while the others remained inside the Black Tower. Humph, humph. When they arrived at the transfer formation, they saw Yi Jinda look menacingly at them. Then, with a flash of light, he had already disappeared from sight. Saying that comes from a Chinese folklore legend referring to how a carp can eventually become a dragon by leaping over the Dragon's Gate also means getting one's big break. Chapter 2184, Sealing the Path. The reason that Yi Jianda so daringly provoked Ling Han like this was because there was another tall, sturdy man standing at his side. He looked to be only about 30, but five-colored light was actually entwining around him. This was a fifth heaven celestial king. The celestial king of the Yi clan, Yi Wuhai. With a fifth heaven celestial king by his side, Yi Jinda naturally dared to glare angrily at Ling Han. Furthermore, if this was not still the territory of the Heavenly Saint Palace, he would even beg Yi Wuhai to kill Ling Han for him. Killing intent flashed through Ling Han's eyes. He had initially planned to leave this kind of trash for his son to deal with, but this trash was actually so arrogant. He was really courting his own death. On the Dragon's Gate mountain, everyone will be equivalent to a carp that is waiting to leap over the Dragon's Gate. Heavenly Tao is extremely just. Everyone's cultivation level will be suppressed to Mountain River tier, and there will be no Celestial King tier, or Ascending Origin tier, or Immortal Palace tier. Ling Han recited the information about Dragon's Gate Mountain that he had memorized. So what if he is a Celestial King? If he dares to interfere at that time, I will try my luck at killing a Celestial King. In a battle of equal levels, aside from Ji Wuming, who else would be able to match me? Ling Han was brimming with confidence. He was definitely not overestimating himself. Ji Wuming had once been a ninth heaven celestial king, and the reason he had reincarnated and began cultivating from the beginning had to be because he wanted to break through to the heavenly venerable tier. Thus, he had surely been stronger than he had been at this cultivation level in his past life. Just how awesome was a ninth heaven celestial king? Thus, the present Ji Wuming had to be superior to all celestial kings if they were at the same cultivation level. Even a ninth heaven celestial king was no exception. Yet Ling Han could manage to battle Ji Wuming to a stalemate. This meant that he could also dominate all celestial kings that were at the same cultivation level as himself. Because there were really too many people that wanted to use this transfer formation, everyone could only line up. Though Ling Han was the Heavenly Will Elder, he did not have many special privileges either. After all, his cultivation level was too low, and not even ascending origin tiers needed to be wary of him, what more a celestial king. After lining up for over a day, they finally boarded the transfer formation. Wang, light surged, and they felt a strong physical pull on their bodies. When they regained their wits, they had already arrived at the small town that was on the westernmost boundary of the rock heaven. Walking from here towards the west for less than 5,000 kilometers, one would have exited the rock heaven. Then, one would have to pass over the 9 dragons heaven, deep sea heaven, and 5 other heavenly realms to be able to enter the Yin River heaven. This time, the Dragon's Gate mountain had appeared there. They began hurrying on their journey. Ling Han used void space, and crossed millions and millions of kilometers, his speed being higher than even most immortal palace tiers. Even so, they had still required half a year's time before finally entering the Yin River heaven. The Yin River heaven lived up to its name. Wherever they were, they would be able to see a long river flowing across the skies. It was dark and dense like iron, but this long river was so high it could not be reached. Even immortal palace tiers could not touch it before they would be struck back down by the storm above the 9 heavens. However, ascending origin tiers could give it a try, but it was said that the waters of the Yin River were incredibly and extraordinarily freezing. Even ascending origin tiers could not stand against this extreme coldness, and would be frozen to death. However, for cultivators who cultivated the regulation of water, this was a sacred place as they could better study the great Tao of water here. Let's check where exactly the Dragon's Gate mountain is. They found a map, and began searching. Here. Once they had confirmed the direction, they continued on their journey, advancing towards the Dragon's Gate mountain. Because they were not familiar with the area, they spent some additional time. After over a dozen days, they finally arrived at the foot of the Dragon's Gate mountain. This had initially been a great ocean, but now an indescribably massive great mountain had suddenly appeared out of nowhere, filling up the entire ocean. It was abundantly clear how colossal the mountain was. However, if one looked up from the foot of the mountain, he would not be able to see the summit at all, and could only see divine clouds and celestial mist wafting around, taking the form of dragons, phoenixes, and other beasts. It also seemed like there was a celestial seated there, reciting the great Tao, which manifested into the light of regulations. The Dragon's Gate mountain was indeed extraordinary. Ding, 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 ding. Dang, 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 dang. Battles were happening everywhere at the foot of the mountain. There was strife everywhere as long as there were people, and there was nothing false about this. After entering into the area of the Dragon's Gate mountain, Ling Han and his group immediately discovered that not only had they lost the ability of flight, even the height that they could leap was greatly restricted. It was as if they had become mere mortals all of a sudden. True, the Dragon's Gate mountain would have been too easy to climb otherwise. We can't draw others into the spatial god tool. Without the records of our entire journey up the mountain, the heaven and earth would absolutely not give us any recognition. Even if we did manage to leap over the Dragon's Gate, it would be for nothing. Ling Han released the women from inside the Black Tower. Next, everyone could only depend on themselves. Even if they were carried up the mountain, that, too, would not be recognized by the heaven and earth. It's fine. Walking for a while is a healthy exercise, Li Sikon joked. However, flight is not possible, nor can one leap too high or too far. In that case, we would not be able to use this path. Ling Han cast his gaze afar. It was all steep, sheer cliffs in this mountainous area, and it could not be so easily crossed. We have to find a major path. They retreated from the mountainous area, and immediately regained the ability of flight. They circled around the mountain, and soon found a main path that was relatively easier to travel. According to the information, there were many such main paths, and there was no need for them all to be cramped on this one to ascend the mountain. Ling Han and his group all descended, and were about to advance when they heard that this area had actually been sealed off by someone. Scram! Immediately, someone shouted at Ling Han and the others. This place has already been occupied by our battle dragon palace. Any intruders will be killed. Does this place belong to you? Ling Han was surprised. There was no rare treasure in this Dragon's Gate mountain, nor were there any celestial medicines or cultivation techniques, and everyone could leap over the Dragon's Gate. Was there any need to seal off the mountain? But when he thought about it further, realization dawned on him. When they were on the mountain, everyone would be restrained by the Tao of heaven and earth. Should they encounter enemies, the advantage elites had in their superior cultivation level could not be exercised at all. It was completely dependent on their strength in a battle of equal levels, which also meant that even if it was a celestial king, if he met with a more freakishly talented severing mundane tier or dividing soul tier, it was still possible that they could be defeated and killed. Hence, to ensure their safety, sealing off the path was naturally the best strategy. If no one could ascend, there naturally would not be any outbreaks of battle, and there was naturally no need to worry. Battle Dragon Palace? Not a bad name, but why is everyone as scared as mice, and completely not daring to battle? Ling Han shook his head, appearing extremely disdainful. Brat, spare the nonsense and scram. There were over a dozen people from the Battle Dragon Palace that were responsible for sealing off the path up the mountain, but their strength was all very low. True, how could those with some strength be willing to seal off the path here? They definitely would have ascended the mountain, wanting to leap over the Dragon's Gate, and turn their ordinary aptitude into extraordinary quality. However, the name of the Battle Dragon Palace was still quite intimidating. It was an ascending origin tier force, so it was no wonder that these people dared to act so arrogantly. You guys are the ones who should scram. Hunyo shot out a fist. Peng, as her punch swept past, all the members of the Battle Dragon Palace were sent flying, scattering like flower petals in the air. Meanwhile, Ling Han shook his head. The heaven and earth has deliberately allowed the Dragon's Gate mountain to arrive in advance for the specific purpose of allowing more elites to appear so that a resistance can be put up against the force of darkness, but these people actually wanted to seal off the mountain. To go against the will of heaven and earth, how could they possibly gain the approval of the heaven and earth? You deserved it. They ascended the mountain, and immediately discovered that they had lost all ability of flight, and their progress had also become slower and slower. The test from heaven and earth had already begun. The great mountain rose majestically, and could not be seen entirely as far as the eye could see. Everyone was focused on hastening on with their journey. It was said that one could not enter into a spatial god tool for the entirety of the climb up the mountain, or all previous efforts would be completely wasted. Thus, they had to manage their stamina. This place seemed divine, yet was extremely short of spiritual chi, and one could only rely on alchemical pills to replenish the origin power that had been expended. Chapter 2185, Rolling Rocks. After walking for a day, the mountain path began to slant. Slightly further ahead, two mountain paths had joined, and become one. If they continued upwards, the mountain paths would continue to join, and ultimately become a single mountain path that would lead right up to the Dragon's Gate. After another day's journey, the mountain paths joined once more, and this time, it was four joined into one. Everyone could feel the difficulties of their journey. It was as if they had become mortals, but the object they had to conquer was a mountain that ascended to the heavens. How could they possibly succeed in such a feat? Thus, it was not strength, cultivation level, or natural talent that was required to ascend the Dragon's Gate mountain, but rather only a determined will and the courage to conquer all. Ling Han included, the pressure that everyone had to sustain was actually different. Even if Ling Han had cultivated the dividing 9 souls, and had 9 source powers of heaven and earth, he did not have any advantage in this place at all either. Everyone was soaked in sweat, and felt extremely weary. They wanted nothing more than to stop for a rest, or even turn right around and descend the mountain. True elites would have to have willpower as strong and firm as iron. We must all forge on. Another day passed, and it was no longer the barren mountain path ahead of them. Instead, a group of people had appeared, and they were presently seated on rocks for a rest. These people had also heard the noise created by Ling Han and his group as they climbed, and turned their eyes towards them, a vigilant expression immediately appearing on their faces. In this place, a high cultivation level was not of much use. Even an ascending origin tier could possibly be killed by a severing mundane tier. There were a total of 9 people in this group, and a purple-robed middle-aged man stood up from the group, and shouted at Ling Han, "Friend, don't go any further." "Why?" Ling Han asked smilingly. "If you continue onwards, we will consider you an enemy and kill you," this purple-robed large man declared, a powerful killing intent appearing in his expression. This group of people were all members of the Battle Dragon Palace, and the purple-robed large man, their leader, was an ascending origin tier elite. However, what was important here was merely willpower, and not cultivation level, and these people all belonged to the category of weaker willpower. Thus, they continuously stopped to rest, and had already split off from the rest of the majority. At present, everyone had practically been weakened to mortal level. So what if he was an ascending origin tier? Thus, they all feared that Ling Han and his group would use force, and naturally hoped that they would not come nearer, but would instead mind their own business. Ling Han thought of the storm of darkness. Suppressing his anger, he said, "Don't worry. There is no previous grudge between us, and conflict will not rise between us. Thus, you guys just have to quietly sit there, and we will only pass you by on our way up the mountain." "Huh, you actually plan to take advantage of the chance to launch an ambush on us, right?" someone from the Battle Dragon Palace called out. Ling Han couldn't help but shake his head. These people themselves were vile, mean characters, and thought everyone else were the same as them. He had initially been unwilling to further weaken the strength of the celestial realm on the basis of his considerations of the storm of darkness, but upon further thought, what were these vile characters useful for? To be blunt, they might probably be the first batch of traitors when the storm of darkness invaded. There was no need to be polite, nor was there anything to be polite about. Ling Han strode forwards. "Since you are unwilling to listen to nice words, I can only resort to force." "Huh, brat, you've shown your true colors now, haven't you?" The members of the Battle Dragon Palace all pointed at Ling Han. "I've seen through your paltry tricks now," written all over their proud expressions. Ling Han didn't even bother to give them any regard. He strode forwards, his hands balling into fists, which he shot forwards. Pung! 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 Not one of them was a match for him, and they were all sent flying with a single punch. Even if their cultivation levels were all at Mountain River tier, the advantage of Ling Han having cultivated to the 5th severance and having 9 divided souls would not be erased. It would only be weakened, but he would still be incredibly powerful. The heaven and earth were just pulling everyone's cultivation level to the same level, but because the heaven and earth were just, the heaven and earth also would not ignore the amount of effort that you had placed, cultivating to the 5th severance, forming 9 divided souls, and so on. "Let's go." They continued climbing. Another 3 days later, the women were finally worn out, and had to stop for a rest. They ingested some alchemical pills at the same time to replenish their greatly expended origin power. Meanwhile, Ling Han and Hunyo feasted. Their body arts were extremely brilliant, and could be extraordinarily useful here because stamina could be recovered by simply eating, unlike origin power, which required absorbing spiritual qi. In this manner, they stopped and climbed and stopped, and about a month later, 18 branch paths had joined into one, and there appeared multiple massive rolling rocks ahead of them. A great many people were pushing these rocks up the mountain, and they were all covered in sweat, veins popping on their foreheads in their exertion. Some could not persist, and the moment they let go, their rolling rocks would instantly press towards them, pushing them down onto the ground, and heavily rolling over them. Pung! The strange thing was the rolling rocks did not roll all the way downhill, but rather stopped bizarrely in a spot that was about 30 meters uphill of Ling Han, as if there was an invisible wall that had stopped their progress. It was naturally impossible that these people would be pushing these rocks for no reason. It had surely been a necessary choice. "Let's give it a try." Ling Han walked further up the mountain, but immediately discovered that not only the rocks were blocked by an invisible wall, but he himself was too. He tried to push a rolling rock, yet discovered that this rock was actually capable of passing through that wall, allowing him to continue his progress onwards. However, this rock was too heavy, and he was immediately sweating profusely. Ling Han stopped after trying for a short while, and returned the rolling rock to its position. Then, he tried to directly tear a hole through that invisible wall, but no matter what he did, it was all fruitless. Pooh! Someone immediately spluttered out in laughter. Idiot! Wasn't it obvious? Everyone was pushing rocks here. Did you think that they were all fools? Ling Han glanced at him, but did not speak. If they were to do the same as everyone else, how were they supposed to stand out from the rest? Of course, perhaps the only method was really to push the rock up the mountain, but choosing to go with the flow without even making his own attempts, how could this kind of person possibly have any future? In this place, Ling Han's 9 source powers of heaven and earth seemed to have entered into a deep slumber, and his divided souls naturally could not be released either. He was not the only one. Hun Yao and the Empress were the same as well, causing their battle prowess to be weakened to an unprecedented level. Thus, Ling Han was even less capable of breaking through this invisible wall. Hey, what are you glaring at me for? The person that had previously scoffed at Ling Han actually didn't give it up, and shouted at Ling Han, "What is it? Are you asking for a fight?" Ling Han ignored him. It looked like the only way really was to push the rock up the mountain. The reason he wanted to find out if there were other ways was naturally out of consideration for the women. He feared that some among them would not be able to hold on. Then, not only would they be unable to advance into severing mundane tier, even their lives would possibly be at risk. Previously, he had seen some people being crushed by the rolling rocks, and they had directly died from the impact. Seeing how Ling Han was unwilling to even respond, that person naturally was mad with fury. With great strides, he rushed towards Ling Han. Pung! He had not reached him when he was sent flying with a punch from a green-robed young man. "Brother Ling." The green-robed young man greeted with a grin. Ling Han turned around, and couldn't help but feel shocked as he replied, "Brother Yen." This person was actually Yen Xianlu. After entering this place, Ling Han had naturally regained his original appearance. Long time no see. Yen Xianlu clapped a hand on Ling Han's shoulder, then leaned towards him, and whispered, "I have already joined the alliance, so please take care of me in the future, Brother Ling." Ling Han faltered. He had not thought that he would have been so fast, and had already managed to gather a group of people to him. He smiled widely, and answered, "Of course." "That's right, Brother Ling, just what level has your strength reached by now that you can make Yi submit willingly to you, and be so utterly impressed with you?" Yen Xianlu was extremely curious. He knew just how strong Yi was, but Yi's expression was filled with reverence when he mentioned Ling Han. This kind of expression appearing on the face of a monarch tier was an absolutely inconceivable matter. Merely dividing soul tier, Ling Han said. "Oh." Yen Xianlu nodded, but was not overly surprised. Chapter 2186, Troublemaker. Yen Xianlu himself was a dividing soul tier, but he had just advanced to the Yang soul. Thus, he estimated that Ling Han had to also be either a Yang soul or Yin soul, so it was natural that he wouldn't be too astounded. Of course, if he knew that not only had Ling Han formed 9 divided souls, he was capable of insta-killing even a 3rd secret immortal palace tier, the expression on his face would definitely be filled with explosive shock. Ling Han was quite concerned about the matter of the alliance, and asked, "Brother Yen, just how far has our alliance progressed by now?" "The flow is good," Yen Xianlu nodded first, but then he sighed. "However, there are a few troublemakers that are not so easily dealt with. They are not impressed by Yi, nor are they convinced by you, an alliance leader who hasn't even shown his face before, and are presently rubbing their hands, just waiting to defeat you when you appear so they can snatch the position of the alliance leader." Ling Han couldn't help but laugh loudly. In terms of battle, he had never feared anyone. Looks like the only way is to push the rocks up the mountain. There were rolling rocks everywhere here, and everyone could easily find one. Then, they would be pushing the rock up the mountain on their ascent. 1 step, 2 steps, and everyone was covered in sweat after only a while, and they all wanted to stop for a rest. But they were pushing a rock uphill. How could they possibly stop for a rest? They could either withdraw themselves and step aside, allowing the rock to roll back downhill, but they themselves would also be pushed downhill, or become exhausted and be crushed by the rolling rock. Even if they escaped death, they would still be severely injured. Only by gritting their teeth and forging onwards would they be able to successfully crash through this barrier. Everyone was aware of this fact, but there were often limits to human power. Once they had surpassed their own limits, their willpower would begin to give in. Hence, this was a test of willpower. They continued to climb the mountain, but their progress became slower and slower. Ling Han continued to cheer the women on. They had gone too long without battle, and their willpower naturally would not be too steady. Only their love for Ling Han was pushing them onwards. And Ling Han was also stirring up their love for him so that they would continue to forge on and stay determined. There could be a great many reasons for determination, such as a yearning for power, the motivation of revenge, and love. The women all forged on determinedly. The level of the severing mundane tier was too important, a dividing line between mortal and immortal. Thus, they had to be able to deliver a strike to the heaven and earth to advance to the severing mundane tier. Otherwise, even if they could become severing mundane tiers, what would be severed would only be their love for Ling Han. This was something that they would definitely not allow. Hence, this ignited an incredibly firm belief in them as they used their slender, delicate hands to push the rocks uphill, allowing sweat to soak them, yet still determined not to give up. Ling Han couldn't help but be impressed by the power of love. If it was hatred, one definitely could not possibly hold on for so long, but love was capable of it. 5 days, 10 days, and not one of the women gave up. All their eyes were firm and steady, as if they were completely transformed. Ling Han involuntarily nodded. It was no wonder that one could only leap over the dragon's gate after experiencing so many tests. That was because if they had not experienced this, how could firm willpower be developed, and how then would they be able to become supremely extraordinary geniuses? A determined person might not be able to become a monarch tier, but those that had become monarch tiers definitely had iron willpower. A month later, they suddenly felt their hands lighten. Those massive rolling rocks had actually vanished. They were first stunned, and then realization dawned on them suddenly. As it turned out, they had passed this test. Instantly, everyone slumped onto the ground, panting heavily. Their journey here was really too difficult. Ling Han looked at the women with gratification. Now that they had passed this test, it was as if everyone's spirits had been reborn. However, there are a great many tests still waiting for us. He raised his head and looked towards the summit, but still could not catch a glimpse of the summit. Who knew how far away it still was? That's right. How has Brother Yen come so quickly here? Ling Han asked casually. Oh, my master deliberately sent me here, Yen Xianlu said. However, one can only leap once over the dragon's gate. Multiple times would not have any effect, and my master has leaped over the dragon's gate 5 epochs ago. Thus, he has only sent me here this time, and has long since returned. What a truly good master. Ling Han nodded. Going by that logic, those celestial kings that were older than an epoch had probably already leaped over the dragon's gate, and would not come in and join in on the excitement here. If any celestial kings came here, their age would definitely be less than an epoch. To say anyone could become a celestial king, yet had not even leaped over the dragon's gate, who would believe it? Too bad, he had actually wanted to find a few celestial kings to beat up. What a coincidence. Yen Xianlu suddenly stood up, and looked downhill. Ling Han's eyes followed his gaze, and saw 3 young people that were presently pushing a rolling rock upwards each. Though they were all soaked in sweat, all their eyes were extremely bright, their fighting spirit soaring sky high. Qing Zixin, Fuzhou, He Xinjue, Yan Xianlu said, turning his head, revealing the names of these three people. Do you still remember how I said that there are a great many people that are not willing to submit to you as the alliance leader in the alliance? These three people are the ones causing the most noise. As they spoke, the three people had also passed this test, and walked towards Yan Xianlu. Brother Cheng, Brother Fu, Brother He. Yan Xianlu clasped his hands, and greeted the three of them respectively. Yet these three people were extremely proud, and were completely aloof. They did indeed were qualified for it because they were all earth souls and monarch tiers as well. They would be able to suppress Yan Xianlu easily. You are, Qing Zixin stared at Ling Han. Brother Fu, Brother He, isn't this person a little familiar? He, now that you say it, I remember. Isn't this our alliance leader, Ling Han? Fu Zhou suddenly smiled. They had all seen Ling Han's memory image before. Indeed. He Xinjue nodded as well. Alliance leader Ling, how about a match? Fu Zhou asked proudly. Even if there was a restriction to their cultivation levels, he was not afraid. In a battle of equals, even if his opponent was a celestial king, he was still confident of his victory. Prodigies were all prideful, and Ling Han could accept that. He stood up. Sure, then let's exchange a few moves. Fu Zhou moved, and launched an attack at Ling Han. Monarch tiers were monarch tiers. Even if their cultivation level had been restricted to the mountain river tier, his battle prowess still far surpassed that. His incredibly domineering punch shot forth. Ling Han parried the blow casually. Peng, Fu Zhou's punch had landed on the palm of his hand, yet did not cause the slightest sound, as if all of its force had been swallowed up. Fu Zhou showed a hint of surprise. Not bad, you do have some strength. Meanwhile, Ling Han shook his arm lightly, and sent Fu Zhou backwards. Then, he pointed a finger at Qing Zixin and He Xinjue. The two of you can fight me together. He Xinjue and Qing Zixin exchanged a look, and both erupted into laughter. We have never had the habit of joining forces. Nor is there any need for it. They each quipped. Fu Zhou, meanwhile, was furious. With himself as the opponent, Ling Han actually dared to challenge Qing Zixin and He Xinjue at the same time. Just how much was he belittling him? You are truly arrogant. He leaped back, and shot out another punch at Ling Han. Ling Han paid him no regard, but instead charged towards Qing Zixin and He Xinjue. He, too, shot out a fist, which turned into two punches that blasted towards the duo. Damn it. Both were enraged. They naturally disdained joining forces with another, but they could not bear such provocation from Ling Han either. They both roared furiously, and countered respectively. Peng! 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 The three of them were instantly entangled in battle. Ling Han was confident he would be able to subdue these three people within 100 moves if there hadn't been restrictions on his cultivation level, even if he had still been an earth soul, and had not formed 9 divided souls, but now that his cultivation level had been suppressed to the mountain river tier, his advantage in battle prowess had also been endlessly reduced, so he could only battle Qing Zixin and the others to a tie. However, Qing Zixin and the others were shocked to death. Chapter 2187, Yield. 3 great monarch tiers were working together, and even then, they were actually only capable of fighting Ling Han to a tie. It should be known that the greater the restrictions on cultivation level, the smaller the advantage they would have as those who have attained the 5th severance, and formed the strongest divided soul. For example, 100 was greater than 90 by 10, but everyone had been weakened 10 times. In that case, 10 was only greater than 9 by 1, and the advantage would correspondingly shrink tenfold. Vice versa, if the restrictions on cultivation level was lifted, then wouldn't Ling Han be even more heaven-defyingly powerful? Qing Zixin and the others were all shaking their heads inwardly. Perhaps Ling Han was only a Yin soul, or even a Yang soul. In that case, without the restriction of cultivation level, any one of them would be able to easily suppress Ling Han. However, that was a matter for the future. At present, though, Ling Han was heavily suppressing them in a battle of 3 against 1, and no matter how they used various celestial techniques, it was of no help in the situation. They were all extremely resentful. That was because after their cultivation levels had been restricted, a great many celestial techniques were no longer usable, causing them to feel like they were tied up, which was incredibly horrible. However, they did not know that the person under the heaviest restriction was Ling Han. His strongest deadly attack was the Great Clash of Source Powers, but now all 9 source powers of heaven and earth had entered into slumber, and could not be used at all. Otherwise, Ling Han would have been able to insta-kill all 3 of them with the first move. Yet Ling Han was completely unconcerned. He had already created his own path. The Great Clash of Source Powers was only one of his deadly attacks, and he would eventually give it up even if the 5 elements could all be improved to the level of the 9th Heaven Celestial King. It was useless. Ling Han's goal was the Heavenly Venerable tier. Even if he managed to advance them to the 9th Heaven Celestial King level, so what? He definitely would not think of them as his true trump cards. He used Fists of Fury, and his aura immediately changed. It was as if he was a primitive emperor that had descended, exuding a domineering air that could suppress one and all. Qing Zixin and the others all paled in shock. Standing in front of Ling Han, they felt very tiny, as if the latter could crush them to dust with a casual punch. For better or worse, they were still monarch tiers, so they hurriedly suppressed the fear in their hearts, burning their fighting spirit as much as possible, and going all out in battle. Ling Han nodded inwardly. The fighting spirit of this trio was worth recognition, and what he wanted was precisely this kind of talent. Otherwise, when they met with the storm of darkness in the future, wouldn't they instantly weaken and flee from battle when they saw how there were more numbers and more elites on the opposing side? He had the mind to make these 3 submit to him, and thus did not use his full power, and merely used Fists of Fury to suppress the trio. Qing Zixin and the others were all shouting in fury, but it was completely useless. On the level of the Mountain River tier, Ling Han was invincible, and even if it was a 9th Heaven Celestial King, it would still be the same. After fighting for half a day, Ling Han suddenly stopped, and asked smilingly, "How about it? Yield?" "No way." Qing Zixin and the others all exclaimed. They were unconvinced, and thought that it was the cultivation level that restricted their movements. Otherwise, how could it be possible that the 3 of them working together were still no match for Ling Han? Ling Han could see their defiance, and thus said, "All right. Then, when we go out, we'll have another match." Qing Zixin and the others looked at one another, and nodded in unison. Though they were not convinced, they had completely acknowledged Ling Han's strength. In a battle of equal levels, they were no match for him, and there was nothing to say about that. "Brother Fu, Brother Cheng, Brother He, come, sit, sit, sit," Yan Xianlu said smilingly. He naturally was playing the role of mediator. Otherwise, with how these 3 people had just been beaten by Ling Han, how could they bring themselves to stay? Indeed, Fu Zhou and the others were initially planning to leave, but firstly, Yan Xianlu had spoken up and invited them, and secondly, they did need to rest and recover their energy. Thus, they nodded, and sat cross-legged on the ground, taking out alchemical pills to ingest. However, they had just taken their alchemical pills out when their vision blurred. Ling Han had actually snatched their alchemical pills. The trio stood up. "You've gone too far, haven't you? Do you plan on humiliating us?" Ling Han smiled, and tossed out 3 alchemical pill bottles with a wave of his hand. "Use the alchemical pills I concoct." The 3 of them took the pill bottles, exchanged looks, and then doubtfully removed the cork of the bottle. After they poured out the alchemical pills, they immediately looked stunned. "Primordial heart-nurturing pill." Ling Han nodded slightly. They recognized this kind of alchemical pill, as expected of monarch tiers. Primordial heart nurturing pill, a 3-star alchemical pill, and even among 3-star alchemical pills, it can be ranked in the upper echelons. For those below ascending origin tier, this is the best alchemical pill for recovering origin power. Furthermore, it's a 6th refinement at that. The three of them spoke one after another, showing that they had considerable knowledge regarding alchemical pills as well. This was natural. Though they were not alchemists themselves, as cultivators, they had to have a very detailed understanding of alchemical pills as well. Otherwise, how would they know if they had made a profit or loss should they purchase an alchemical pill at the auction house? Or if they should obtain one in an ancient site, how would they know if it could be ingested? Why wasn't it a 4-star alchemical pill? Wasn't Ling Han capable of concocting such an alchemical pill? This was not Ling Han being stingy, but that 4-star alchemical pills were prepared for ascending origin tiers. And why was ascending origin tier called ascending origin tier? That was because the origin power in their bodies was soaring, turning into source power. If cultivators of the Immortal Palace tier or below ingested this kind of alchemical pill, they would definitely explode and die from the force. You concocted this? Fu Zhou asked in disbelief. Though this was only a 3-star alchemical pill, what did 6th refinement mean? Ling Han definitely had to be a 4-star alchemist. In terms of pure status, 4-star alchemists would definitely be superior to dividing soul tiers, and superior by an unknown amount at that. Ling Han smiled slightly, and answered, "That's right." Gasp. Fu Zhou and the others all inhaled sharply, appearing incredibly stunned. Fuck, are you even human? Not only are you a monarch tier, you are also an alchemist, and a 4-star grandmaster at that? Monster, an absolute monster. However, it was also precisely because of this that the conflicted feelings that Fu Zhou and his group felt towards Ling Han decreased considerably. A 4-star grandmaster, and one that was so young, had extremely high hopes of advancing to become a 5-star alchemist. And once Ling Han became a 5-star alchemist, to say nothing of them, even celestial kings would be very polite upon meeting him. Brother Ling. They paid their greetings to Ling Han again, and this time their manner was filled with sincerity, and they now considered him important. Of course, they had not been fully convinced yet. After leaving this place, they would definitely have another fierce battle with Ling Han again. Ling Han nodded, and said, "Recover your vitality quickly. We still have to climb the mountain." They continued to recover their vitality, and after half a day, Fu Zhou and his group opened their eyes at the same time. They had completely recuperated. As expected of the primordial heart nurturing pill, and it's a 6th refinement at that. Merely a single pill is enough to help me recover practically all my vitality. And, if it was our own alchemical pills, one would only help to recover about 30% of our power, and the more alchemical pills ingested, the stronger the immunity would be. Not only would its effects drop drastically, it would also leave behind alchemic poison in the body. The trio were all profuse with their praise. Previously, they had only known that this alchemical pill was good, but they had completely no knowledge of the extent of its benefits. They only knew after trying it out themselves. Let's go. The group continued their climb, and after journeying for a stretch, they discovered that the air was getting thinner and thinner, causing their faces to become incredibly pale, and their bodies to sway, practically about to pass out. After advancing into the flower blossom tier, cultivators would be able to fly in the skies and tunnel through the ground, no longer requiring ordinary food or even air to breathe. As long as there was spiritual qi, they could stay alive. Yet now, they actually felt difficulties in breathing. How could this not be extremely illogical? Clearly, this was another test from the heaven and earth. Hold on. Ling Han cheered the women on. If there was anyone that really could not bear it, he could only draw them into the Black Tower. He could not really allow them to die here, after all, right? Chapter 2188, Encountering Second Brother Again. The air here was extremely thin, causing a group of people who had cultivated to the celestial level to actually have difficulties with breathing. It could not be denied that the power of the heaven and earth was really too frightening. No matter how much you struggled, you could still only play within the limits allowed by the heaven and earth. You see, you had thought you had already transcended, but in truth, you could not escape from the palm of the heaven and earth at all. The expressions of Ling Han, Yan Xianlu, Qing Zixin, and the others were all slightly ugly. Their ambitions were lofty, and their pursuit was to escape from the shackles of heaven and earth, but from the look of things now, it was easier than done. Perhaps only after becoming celestial kings would they just barely gain the right to play against heaven and earth. A ninth heaven celestial king was equal to the heaven and earth, and the only method to transcend heaven and earth was to become a heavenly venerate. Ling Han clenched his fists, his resolve even firmer than before. You can do it. He continuously encouraged the women, and Qing Zixin and his group could not understand this. Even Yan Xianlu could not really accept it. As they saw it, cultivation should be emotionless. How could one possibly reach great accomplishments with so many concerns on his mind? Not only did Ling Han prize romantic affections, he also had a large number of lovers, and he could actually progress quickly to stand out from the rest even with that? Inconceivable. The further uphill they went, the more frightening the thinness of the air became. They had all sunk into a powerful state of suffocation, their breaths becoming extremely hurried. They all felt that the air they inhaled with each breath was not enough for their use, and they could only suck in large mouthfuls of air with each inhalation. But the more this was the case, the greater the toll on their stamina, causing them to feel extremely horrible, wanting nothing more than to just lie down and rest to their heart's content. If they lay down here, they would never be able to wake up again. Though the heaven and earth wanted to nurture talent, what was the use of trash without a firm determination? Surpassing Ling Han's expectations, none in Heli and Xuanshua's group fell back, nor did any one of them truly pass out. Instead, they all gritted their teeth and forged on. Even Yi Shuangshuang and the Lunar King were no exceptions. They could see a great many people fallen on the ground on their way. Some still had a sliver of life, while for others, even their spirits had been destroyed. Climbing the Dragon's Gate mountain and leaping over the Dragon's Gate had never been an easy feat, but was instead filled with danger. Ling Han did not interfere by drawing those people that had fallen on the ground but were still alive into a spatial god tool. Perhaps, there were some among them that had great willpower, and could emerge victorious over the heaven and earth, overcome their own limits, and stand back up with their own power, right? This was a deadly test, as well as a great opportunity. Over a dozen days later, they suddenly felt their breaths tremble, and that feeling as if they could die from suffocation at any moment disappeared. As it turned out, they had already walked out of the test for the second stage. Instantly, everyone slumped onto the ground, panting heavily. This test from heaven and earth is really harsh, Qing Zixin panted. At this time, he couldn't bother with his image as a monarch tier anymore, and flopped onto the ground, his forehead covered with sweat. Fu Zhou put on a calm air, and asked, "It's just tempering your willpower. Brother Cheng, could it be that you can no longer take it?" Qing Zixin pointed downhill. "If you're so capable, then you can just go downhill and do it again. I'm no idiot. I wouldn't do something so senseless." Fu Zhou naturally refused. If he really fell for this provocation, then he would really be an idiot. Again, Ling Han took out some primordial heart-nurturing pills for everyone. This alchemical pill was already a great item for recovering origin power, and added with his sixth refinement, not only were its recovery effects even better, the immunity to this alchemical pill would also be far lesser than with other alchemical pills. Very soon, everyone had recovered their vitality, and became energized again. "I will definitely not come a second time to this damn mountain," Yan Xianlu declared, shaking his head. That's exactly what I thought." He Xinjue laughed. They were just about to continue the climb when they heard sounds of battle coming from the distance. Very soon, 4 people appeared in their sight. However, it was not a battle of 2 against 2, but rather a battle of 3 against 1. The sole person had fallen into a disadvantage, but his movements were great and wide, possessing the domineering air of one who was an emperor, and all subjects would be bowing in submission to him. He was steady in his defense, and was still far from defeat. In fact, this was possibly him looking for an opening, and he could possibly launch a fierce counterattack at any moment, turning the situation on its head. Though this person's fist technique isn't that polished, it has a supreme air of dominance. Fu Zhou immediately looked stunned. Shinjua nodded. That's right. I have a feeling that this fist technique was created by this person himself, but limited by cultivation level. The power of the fist technique is still not very strong. However, because he has invented it himself, it is the path that suits him the best, so he is able to show might that is beyond expectations. To say nothing else, merely with this air of dominance, this powerful self-confidence, this person would definitely become greatly accomplished. Qing Zixin also gave a very high assessment. However, Ling Han's mouth was half gaping, a stunned expression on his face. Isn't this second brother? Hunyou asked, slanting her forehead. She naturally went along with the way Ling Han addressed him. The Rain Emperor. The Empress also nodded. This man that was battling 3 people alone, and had been given such a high assessment from Fu Zhou and his group was actually the Rain Emperor. After entering into the celestial realm, the Rain Emperor had left by himself not long after. He planned to journey in this new heaven and earth, and was unwilling to be protected by Ling Han, because his ambitions were lofty, and to be protected by another was not the path he walked. Since they parted, it had been more than 10,000 years, and Ling Han had never gotten any news of the Rain Emperor. He had not thought that he would actually encounter him here. Rain Emperor, you won't be able to escape today. Xiao, another figure charged out, joining the battle. This time, it had become a battle of 4 against 1. However, that was not the end of it. Another 2 figures appeared, charging forwards with twisted expressions on their faces, similarly aiming directly for the Rain Emperor. 6 against 1. Even if the Rain Emperor had astonishing battle prowess, in a battle of 6 against 1, and with his cultivation level restricted to Mountain River tier, his advantage of the 5th severance and the like had been endlessly reduced. Immediately, he was in a critical situation. You have joined our great sect but for 3,000 years, and not only have you become a holy son, you actually even dare to think of cultivating the mighty benevolent scroll? That is a supreme secret technique that only the sect master can cultivate. What would we be then? We'll send you on your way to the afterlife today. The 6 of them all used ultimate moves, each aiming to deliver a fatal strike. Though Ling Han was not yet sure of the situation, with his second brother in danger, how could he possibly just sit by and watch? Xiao, he immediately charged into the battle with a battle cry, brandishing his fists, and launching an offensive at the 6 of them. Second brother, I've come. The Rain Emperor only glanced at him, and then burst into laughter. Fourth brother, you have come just in time. Pung. Ling Han forcibly tore an opening into the battle, and stood back to back with the Rain Emperor. The brothers were both bare-handed, yet were like 2 great emperors from the primordial age, capable of suppressing one and all. Among the group of 6, a white-robed young man shouted, "Who are you? Why are you interfering? Are you an idiot?" Ling Han scoffed. "This is my second brother, I am his 4th brother, and you are asking me why I am interfering?" The 6 of them couldn't help but feel gloomy. Wasn't the Rain Emperor all alone? Why had a 4th brother suddenly appeared out of nowhere? Then wouldn't there be a 1st brother and 3rd brother as well? Where were they then? Friend, a wise man looks after his own hide. We are determined to kill him today, and if you join in, we will only be killing another person. What's the point? A green-robed young man advised. We are all monarch tiers, so do you think you can stop us? Ling Han scoffed. So what if they were monarch tiers? He couldn't even remember how many monarch tiers he had killed by now. He stated calmly, "You are trying to compare numbers, aren't you? Come, wives, brothers, come out for a show." He. He. Hunyou, Yan Xianlu, and the others all stepped out, each of them exuding a forceful aura. Chapter 2189, Brothers Join Forces. In a battle of equals, King Tears could use numbers to overwhelm the opposing side, but it would be very difficult for Emperor Tears to do so. Even if they could overwhelm their enemies with numbers, they would need the combined forces of a great many Emperor Tears. And in the case of Monarch Tears, it was practically impossible to kill that kind of opponent. At the beginning, the 6 of them were brimming with confidence. Even if Ling Han and the Rain Emperor were both Monarch Tears, they were 6 Monarch Tears against 2 Monarch Tears, so even if there were some additional pawn soldiers added to the equation, what could it do? They would only be crushed into dust. However, when Yan Xianlu and the others walked out, the 6 people immediately looked stunned because the aura that these people were exuding was world-shaking. Which one of them was not a giant among men? Monarch Tears, they were all Monarch Tears. Fuck, how could this be possible? Usually, it was very rare for even a great sect of the Celestial King Tier to have a Monarch Tier heir. Only those 5th Heaven Celestial King Tier forces and above could nurture this kind of prodigy, and only one such heir would exist in each era. Only a 9th Heaven Celestial King Tier sect could simultaneously nurture a considerable number of Monarch Tier heirs. For example, the Great Majestic Sect. Even among 9th Heaven Celestial King Tier forces, the Great Majestic Sect was one of the finest existences, practically the king of the entire celestial realm, an invincible great emperor. But what was going on here now? With a simple tug, so many Monarch Tears had popped out? You are Yan Xianlu. You are Qing Zixin. Fu Zhou. He Xinjue. These 6 people actually recognized Yan Xianlu and the others, though they were not familiar with the Empress, Hunyou, and the other women. Zhang Fei. Yan Xianlu nodded, looking at one of them. Feng Xingren. Qing Zixin also looked towards another person. It looked like these people were all Monarch Tears of the Eastern Celestial Realm, and they might have met each other before, or heard of them, or seen their memory images. Brother Yan, give me some face, and don't get involved in this messy situation, Zhang Fei stated solemnly. In a one-on-one battle, he had the confidence to defeat Yan Xianlu, but in a battle royale, the Rain Emperor was too strong, so with the additional help of another Monarch Tier, the difficulty level of killing him would be multiplied several times over. Yan Xianlu shook his head. I would instead like to ask Brother Zhang to give me some face, and stop here, all right? On the other side, Feng Xingren was also asking Qing Zixin for some face, and was similarly met with rejection from Qing Zixin. The latter planned to play the role of mediator, and resolve the grudges between the 2 sides. Are you insisting on a battle? Zhang Fei's expression darkened. They were determined to kill the Rain Emperor today. This young man was too frightening. He had just joined the sect for 3,000 years, yet had already charged all the way from the position of an external disciple to the seat of Holy Sun, and now was even showing off more of his ability, causing the other Holy Sons to pale in comparison. If they did not kill him now, there couldn't be any other chances for them to do so in another few years. Brother Zhang, harmony is to be prized in all situations. Yan Xianlu only played mediator. Yet Ling Han shook his head, and interrupted, Brother Yan, you guys step down first. The reason I asked you guys to come out was merely so that they could see just how many people we brothers have on our side. However, in an actual battle, us 2 brothers are enough. The Rain Emperor laughed. 4th brother, you are still as domineering as usual. Isn't 2nd brother the same? Ling Han laughed as well. 2 mad men. This was the thought that Zhang Fei and his group shared, yet they were pleased with how arrogant these 2 people were. Otherwise, with so many Monarch Tears on their side, and their cultivation levels being further weakened, they would not have much of an advantage either, even if they were stronger. It was better now. A battle of 6 against 2 was going to be a sure win for them no matter how they thought about it. Use your strongest moves from the start, and don't give them any chance to back out. The 6 people communicated through their divine senses. No matter how arrogant a person was, they could not possibly be an idiot. If they were outmatched, they would definitely call for help, so they definitely could not give them that opportunity. The Empress and Hu Niu were naturally filled with confidence in Ling Han. They both immediately stepped back, and Yan Xianlu and the others also stepped back after a slight hesitation. After all, Ling Han had previously battled 3 of them all by himself, to the extent that Xing Zixin and the other had completely given up. "Second brother, it's all right to kill this trash, right?" Ling Han asked. The lives of these 6 people were dependent only on the whims of the Rain Emperor. "Just attack as you like." The Rain Emperor waved a hand. The so-called monarch tiers were completely below his notice. "All right." Ling Han nodded. With this, he could really go all out. "You two are truly arrogant," Zhang Fei exclaimed menacingly. He gave a signal, and the 6 great monarch tiers immediately moved simultaneously, launching an offensive at Ling Han and the Rain Emperor. Their main target was the latter. There was not the slightest significance to killing Ling Han. Hence, one of them was in charge of tying up Ling Han, while the remaining 5 launched deadly attacks on the Rain Emperor. So weak. Ling Han humphed, and burst out with his full power using Fists of Fury. Boom, the fist intent reverberated out, causing everyone to feel the fury presently in Ling Han's heart. Fists of Fury naturally could only show its full power in a state of fury. Pang, pang, pang. As a fist shot out, 3 people were instantly sent flying outwards. The Rain Emperor's eyes involuntarily lit up, and he declared, "Fourth brother, you have finally created your own path." Though it had always been Ling Han that had been the strongest in the past, the Rain Emperor had always worried about him. With how Ling Han kept to the routine, his future accomplishments would not possibly surpass predecessors, and he would be confined within set boundaries. Of course, this kind of confinement could possibly cause even most other celestial kings to be envious because it could possibly reach the 8th heaven, or even 9th heaven celestial king tier. But just going along with how others walked, how could he possibly transcend, and leap out of the set boundaries of heaven and earth? And now, seeing Ling Han use this kind of fist technique, he felt naturally gratified. Ling Han had finally created his own path. "I am still no match for second brother." Ling Han sighed. This second brother was a true natural and extraordinary prodigy. Long ago, when he was in the small world, he had already created his own Tao, and walked his own path. The Rain Emperor was not like him, who had a heavenly venerable tier treasure like the Black Tower. Instead, all that he possessed was gained through his own power, yet he had still advanced into the ranks of monarch tiers. This was what was truly heaven-defying about him. Ling Han felt that he was inferior to his second brother if it was to be a fair competition. The Rain Emperor laughed. "There is no precedent for my path. Fourth brother, you have started later, but have surpassed me now." He, too, brandished his fists, and it was similarly a fist technique. The might of his fist technique was inferior to Ling Han's, and only managed to force Feng Xingren and the others to back down. Yet Ling Han knew himself. This was because his fists of fury had a sliver of the source power of heaven and earth in them, so it was naturally heaven-defying. After this punch, Zhang Fei and the others all bore ugly expressions. One Rain Emperor just barely managed to match 3 of them, yet Ling Han was even stronger, sending 3 of them flying with a single punch. Furthermore, the latter still had a good few monarch tiers eyeing them covetously from the sidelines. How could they possibly succeed with this? It would only be wishful thinking. "Let's go." They immediately made their decision. Fighting here would be too disadvantageous for them. They were all already heaven souls, while the Rain Emperor was merely an earth soul. Once they left this place, it could not be claimed that any one of them would be able to kill the Rain Emperor easily, but at least the joined forces of 2 of them were definitely capable of achieving that goal. The 6 of them raced towards the mountain peak. The restrictions of the heaven and earth here were too strong. Even a celestial king would find it very difficult to catch up with them. Ling Han wanted to pursue them, but was stopped by the Rain Emperor. "Don't be concerned about that trash. They are just nice for me to practice my moves. In a battle of Earth Soul against Heaven Soul, he actually said 6 great heaven soul monarch tears were only good enough for him to practice his moves. This second brother was really very ambitious. Ling Han laughed loudly, and replied, "I'll listen to second brother." He naturally would not take Zhang Fei and his group to heart either. A true monarch tier should have an invincible heart. How could they possibly join forces with others to kill another because of mere jealousy? Merely because of this, he felt that these 6 people were completely beneath his notice. "Come, let's talk as we walk." The Rain Emperor slung an arm around Ling Han's shoulders, and Ling Han did the same as well. The 2 brothers walked towards the mountain peak, and spoke of what they had experienced in these many years. Chapter 2190, Summit. The Rain Emperor's experiences were naturally very rough. After he'd begun his lone journey, he had done odd jobs in powerful clans before, had been a disciple in inferior, minor sects, had also been quick to repay debts of gratitude and vengeance, had been forced deep into the mountains, and had become a loner. However, he was extremely resilient. He had always been able to walk out of multiple dilemmas, and became stronger and stronger. The Rain Emperor's luck was not too bad either. When he attained the 4th severance, he entered into an ancient site, and obtained a natural peach seal, allowing him to achieve the 5th severance, and after advancing into dividing soul tier, he obtained the remains of a 9th heaven celestial king, which he then refined into his own body. What kind of benefits did that have? He achieved dividing 9 souls. To accomplish this, it was not absolutely necessary that one had to have 9 source powers of heaven and earth. For example, Ji Wuming had also formed 9 divided souls with the celestial king imprint from his last life, but Ling Han had not become a celestial king in his last life, nor had he obtained any celestial king remains, so he could only rely on the source powers of heaven and earth. In comparison, using the source powers of heaven and earth to form 9 divided souls was definitely superior. Even a 9th heaven celestial king could only stand equal to the heaven and earth instead of truly being capable of replacing the heaven and earth. Later, the Rain Emperor joined the Great Majestic Sect, and very soon climbed from the position of an external disciple all the way to become a holy son. With his domineering air and strength, he definitely left his competitors far behind, causing all the other holy sons to pale in color next to his brilliance. Thus, he met with the combined targeting of a great many holy sons, which ultimately took the form of killing intent at Dragon's Gate Mountain as they launched an attack on him. However, the Dragon's Gate Mountain was very unique. Everyone's cultivation level would be suppressed to the mountain river tier, and the Rain Emperor had created his own techniques, forming his own path. In a situation of his cultivation level being suppressed, he would instead become stronger. Added with Ling Han's help, they had sent the 6 holy sons into panicked flight. Ling Han couldn't help but muse inwardly that this second brother's luck was actually overwhelmingly strong. He clearly did not have any heaven-defying treasure, nor was he a reincarnated 9th heaven celestial king, yet he still managed to attain dividing 9 souls. As long as he could break through the barrier of heaven's soul, the Rain Emperor would be able to form 9 divided souls as easily as splitting bamboo, looking down on all immortal palace tiers. This was a height that even the Empress and Hu Niu could not reach. Ling Han was sure that there were indeed doted sons of heaven and earth in this world. Of course, the Rain Emperor himself was an extraordinary prodigy of cultivation, and this was an undeniable fact. The Dragon's Gate Mountain really had a variety of different tests of willpower. Thankfully, all of them either were monarch tiers, or had something that supported their determination. Their willpower was like a sharp blade that became stronger and sturdier through being tempered. 7 years later, they could finally see the summit. Everyone looked overjoyed, and hurriedly increased their pace. They could see that there was a stone doorway at the summit, and it looked quite ordinary, but hundreds of beasts were engraved on the doorframe, and they all looked vivid and lifelike. These are all source beasts, someone said slowly, the creatures that were born at the beginning of the heaven and earth. They carry a natural intimidating air, and even if they are merely engravings, it can still be felt. Furthermore, aside from heaven and earth, there is not one person that can carve out the image of a source beast. Ling Han had heard that theory before, and nodded internally. That was why it was said that the Dragon's Gate mountain was nurtured by the heaven and earth. This was clear evidence. Now, it was only the last step that was left, leaping over the Dragon's Gate. Ling Han's gaze swept by. He actually spotted a few familiar faces. Brother Ling. Someone walked over, clasping his hands in greeting towards Ling Han. Yulan Fenghua. His expression was filled with confidence. Not too long ago, he had successfully broken through to the Immortal Palace tier, and was presently a first secret elite. After he had leaped over the Dragon's Gate, he would be further improved in all aspects. In the future, it might be that he could even become an equal of the Imperial Void Celestial King. Who was the Imperial Void Celestial King? A ninth heaven Celestial King. In fact, he could possibly become a heavenly venerate in a few more epochs. Ling Han nodded, and replied, so it is Brother Yulan. Yulan Fenghua couldn't help but ask, after we leave, why don't we have a spar? In the past, when they had entered the Lost Land from the ancient realm, both he and Ling Han were clearly dividing soul tiers, yet he was clearly no match for the latter. This was something he could not accept, and now that he had broken through to the Immortal Palace tier, he thus issued a challenge to Ling Han. He was not planning to use his superior strength to bully the weak, and merely wanted Ling Han to admit that he was outmatched, satisfying his pride. Sure, Ling Han replied casually. This person had repeatedly nurtured sinister designs against him, and he could not help but want to kill him too. As for the Imperial Void sect, with how prodigious he was, as long as he had changed his identity, and showed off a bit of himself, he was confident that they would not close their doors on him. Ling Han. A soft exclamation rang out, and Wenren, too, arrived elegantly, glaring angrily at Ling Han. You owe my master a great debt of gratitude, yet you actually turned your back on us. Are you even still human? Ling Han sighed softly. Towards Shang Jiwei, he indeed felt grateful, apologetic, and a little hateful. His feelings towards her were very conflicted. He shook his head, and said, regarding Aunt Wei, there will come a day when I will make my explanations to her. Ungrateful vile character, die. And Ran ignored him, and moved directly. Boom. The Rain Emperor moved, blocking Ran's blow. You want to touch my fourth brother? You have to get through me first. And Ran was surprised. Though her cultivation level had been suppressed, she was still a super monarch tier. Even an ordinary monarch tier would stumble back in retreat from this blow, but the Rain Emperor had parried hers easily. In fact, her arm was even numb from the force. Just how domineering was this? She was not to be trifled with either. Immediately, she charged towards the Rain Emperor with a soft exclamation. Pang, pang, pang. The two of them battled fiercely. The Rain Emperor was pulling no punches in his attacks, sending and ran back in continuous retreat. There naturally were people who knew and ran here, and they couldn't help but watch in shock. Who was this incredibly domineering man? He was really too awesome. Meanwhile, Ran was completely filled with disbelief. In a battle of equals, she would actually be the one being suppressed. It should be known that even Shang Jiwei had said that she herself was also not much stronger than this at this stage. Then didn't this mean that the Rain Emperor was even stronger than Shang Jiwei in her youth? She did not believe it. And Ran's battle cry did not die out. She was determined to defeat the Rain Emperor. Ling Han looked at the Rain Emperor, and looked at Ran. A strange thought suddenly popped up in his mind. Could these two become a couple? Leap over the Dragon's Gate. He gathered his idle thoughts. With how domineering the Rain Emperor was, he naturally had his own mind. There was no need for him to be overly concerned. The women were all eager to give it a try. Now that they had reached this place, it could be said that they had completed 90% of the journey, but as the saying went, the closer one was to completing a task, the tougher it got. If this last leap was not accomplished, then the carp would still be a carp, and could not become a dragon. And the last leap was not simple either. It was not everyone that could succeed. Their belief had to be determined. Some leaped over and turned into dragons, flying down the mountain, while some fell off the mountain, howling in pain. They naturally were smashed into bits, with no hope of reprieve. The women all had determined, resolute expressions. At this moment, their willpower was as strong as divine metal, love supporting them. They definitely could not fail. They began to leap over the dragon's gate one after another. Ling Han's hands were clenched tightly into fists. He was concerned about all of them. First, it was Zhu Xian'er. With a leap, she crossed over the dragon's gate, and her body was immediately extended, turning into the body of a dragon, but her limbs did not change much. They merely took the form of dragon-clawed paws. Her 4 paws grasped at the clouds, and after circling once in the air, she left towards the foot of the mountain. Then, it was Li Sikan, Lu Yutong, Helian Xuanxue. Each woman passed the test successfully, and when the last woman, Shui Yenyu, also crossed over the dragon's gate successfully, Ling Han finally breathed a sigh of relief. Qing Zixin, Yan Xianlu, and the others also leaped over the dragon's gate one after another, turning into dragons that descended the mountain. "Brother Ling, I'll take my leave first," Yulan Fenghua said smilingly, striding towards the dragon's gate. His white robes fluttered gracefully, with him looking incredibly poised and confident. With a light leap, he immediately turned into a green dragon that danced through the air. "Second brother, stop fighting," Ling Han said to the Rain Emperor. "All right." The Rain Emperor was very decisive, and turned around suddenly. Tossing and ran off his tail, he leaped over the dragon's gate and left. "Don't even think of leaving." And Ran was not willing to give up, and set off in hot pursuit. Chapter 2191, Dragon Transformation Technique. Ling Han actually hoped that this second brother of his would gain a lover. Though the Rain Emperor had previously had a harem, when he had entered into the ancient realm, he had left behind all romantic affairs, his full being focused on cultivation. In Ling Han's eyes, this was too boring. Right. At present, they could continuously climb to the apex of cultivation, but what if the day came when there was nowhere further for them to ascend? What pleasures would there be left of life? It would be a different story if he had the company of a lover. However, the Rain Emperor was too domineering and too assertive. Would he be willing to listen to the advice of others? Ling Han sighed internally. With a bound, he leaped over the dragon's gate. Instantly, he felt a supreme force wrap around him, causing a tremendous change to take place in his form. Dragon transformation. In truth, Celestials could change their form however they liked, and it was not the slightest bit difficult for them to take the form of a dragon. However, at present, it was not something as simple as just having the form of a dragon. There were masses of dragon chi surging towards his body. The dragon chi continuously nurtured his body, pushing it towards greater strength, and even turned into multiple seals, transmitting the intent of heaven and earth. Dragon transformation technique. For some reason, these 3 words flashed through Ling Han's mind. There is a cultivation technique contained in this dragon chi, and it is named Dragon Transformation Technique. After successfully learning it, one would gain the ability to transform into a dragon. Of course, this dragon transformation is only a general meaning, and does not really mean that one would truly become a dragon. Instead, he would possess the strength of a dragon. By then, if everyone were like dragons, then when the force of darkness invades, we would also be able to expel them. Hiss, this time, the heaven and earth has really spared no effort, actually passing on such a cultivation technique. Ling Han did not place too much importance on this dragon transformation technique. He was a cultivator of the indestructible heaven scroll, which was superior to the Tao of heaven and earth, and was the strongest and most powerful technique in this world. However, the installation of dragon chi into his body still granted him great benefits. Moreover, when the dragon transformation technique has been cultivated to the highest level, one would be able to form the chi of the immortal dragon inside his body. One streak of chi would be equivalent to a full-force blow from an immortal dragon. However, the dragon chi is too hard to cultivate, and would be gone once you have used it in an attack. You would have to start accumulating it from the beginning again. Additionally, the quantitative limit of dragon chi would also be restricted by the space inside the dantian. One could not possibly accumulate it continuously without end. Ordinarily, a first heaven celestial king would be able to cultivate a streak of dragon chi, and fifth heaven means 5 streaks, while ninth heaven would be 9 streaks. Ling Han read the information of the dragon transformation technique, and nodded slowly. For him, the dragon transformation technique was not particularly significant, but the dragon chi that he could eventually cultivate was not too bad, as it could increase his explosive power. His body danced in the air, completely beyond his control. Dragon chi entered his body, improving Ling Han's physique in all aspects, but in truth, this improvement was not very great, because Ling Han had already cultivated every cultivation level to perfection, and the effect of the dragon chi was negligible. Instead, the 9 source powers of heaven and earth within his body became livelier, greedily absorbing this dragon chi. They were nurtured from the heaven and earth, and naturally also relied on the heaven and earth. This dragon chi only possessed the shape of a dragon, but was actually the source power of the heaven and earth, which was naturally beneficial to strengthening the source powers of heaven and earth. For the Empress and Hunyo, the dragon chi pouring into their bodies could possibly double their strength or even triple it, but for Ling Han, it would already be good enough if it could increase his strength by 1%. However, he had already ground his battle prowess to the pinnacle of the dividing soul tier, and to say nothing of increasing his strength by 100th upon this basis, even if it was just an increase of a 10,000th, it would still be incredibly difficult. With this comparison, it was clear how powerful the power of heaven and earth was. He descended from the skies, and when he landed on a plane, the dragon chi had also been fully absorbed. Die! An attack was already flying towards him. Ling Han looked up, and it was actually Zhang Fei. He wielded a silver spear in his hands, and at this time, every seal was already glowing brightly as he stabbed his spear towards Ling Han. Previously, Ling Han had stopped them from committing murder, and now they were going to kill Ling Han. On the other side, the Rain Emperor was already fighting with Feng Xingren and the others, but in a battle of 1 against 5, he had naturally fallen into a disadvantage. Thankfully, the Empress and Hunyo moved in time, and managed to hold 4 of them back, allowing the Rain Emperor and Feng Xingren to battle one-on-one. At this time, how terrifying the Rain Emperor was could clearly be seen. Even if he was a minor level inferior to Feng Xingren, and the latter was a great monarch tier, the former was still capable of fighting the latter to a stalemate, his battle prowess powerful to a heaven-defying extent. Qing Zixin, Fu Zhou, and Yan Xianlu were all watching in shock. No wonder the other man could become Ling Han's second brother. This battle prowess was truly astonishing. Even Wenren had forgotten to attack. She only knew that the Rain Emperor was very strong, but when all their cultivation levels were suppressed, the extent of their freakishness was also shrunk down. Only now did she know that the Rain Emperor could actually be as strong as this. Ling Han's brow wrinkled in a frown, and he glanced at Zhang Fei. Then, he indifferently threw out a punch. Pooh! Zhang Fei instantly exploded into a shower of blood from the impact of this punch. At first, Qing Zixin and the others were already gaping with shock, and now they felt their scalps go numb. Zhang Fei was their equal, and was in fact even slightly stronger than them, but in front of Ling Han, he exploded just from the force of a single punch. Just how wide was the gap in power between the two of them? And they actually said that they wanted to spar with Ling Han. This was practically a joke. No wonder he thought so highly of Ling Han. So that was the case. If they had not seen it with their own eyes, how could they possibly imagine that a heaven soul could actually be as strong as this? Yulan Fenghua's pupils also dilated in shock. This kind of heaven soul was really too terrifying, being able to insta-kill a monarch tier of the same cultivation level with a single blow. If he was honest with himself, it would definitely be impossible for him to do the same if he was sent back to Heaven's Soul. And precisely because of this, his killing intent fell completely beyond his control. If he did not kill Ling Han now, then when the latter advanced to the Immortal Palace tier, he probably would be dying in defeat. Subconsciously, his feet were already moving. Ha 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 ha. A loud laugh rang out, and pang, a figure descended from the skies. A terrifying aura surged out, causing a chill to rise from the depths of everyone's hearts. Ling Han's eyes swept over this newcomer, and his pupils involuntarily dilated. Ji Wuming. There was no longer any restriction of cultivation level here. Ji Wuming spread out his aura without any reservations. He was clearly only a heaven soul, yet was even more domineering than any celestial king. Ji Wuming's expression was filled with evil. His eyes swept over the gathered masses. Not bad, not bad. There is also a large amount of source power of heaven and earth on you. It would be a waste on you people, so you should just contribute it to me. He moved aggressively, paying no concern to who his opponent was, and just simply killed a man, then feeding on him forcefully. In this manner, he had naturally become a public enemy. Murder, feeding on the corpse, what was this? Let's work together and destroy him, someone called out loudly, encouraging others to join forces. Meanwhile, some had turned and fled. Even if they won this kind of battle, what would be the point? There was not the slightest benefit to be gained. Ling Han also moved in a hurry, drawing all the women into the Black Tower. Faced with Ji Wuming, he was only certain that he could stand against him, but did not think that he would be able to protect the women at the same time. It was the same the other way round. Ji Wuming, too, could not possibly protect the lives or life of someone while he was barraged by Ling Han's offensive. Ji Wuming moved like lightning. With a tremble of his figure, 9 divided souls surged from his body, and began a massacre. As expected, he, too, had formed 9 divided souls. The present Ji Wuming's cultivation level was comparable to first secret Immortal Palace tier, and his battle prowess had surged directly to peak stage 4th secret, which was incredibly terrifying. Run, 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 everyone, run. After Ling Han drew the women into the Black Tower, he had no other worries. Thus, he turned and ran towards Ji Wuming, wanting to stop his random slaughter. However, he had just moved when he felt a force directed at the back of his head. The person who had made this move was Yulan Fenghua. Chapter 2192, Celestial Killer Spear. Ling Han involuntarily humphed. This Yulan Fenghua was really very petty to actually make a move on him at this time, and it was a sneak attack at that. How despicable. Without even turning his head, he greeted the incoming blow with a punch of his own. Boom! A frightening light burst out, as if the heavens were collapsing. Yulan Fenghua paled in shock. Ling Han had actually dissipated his strike. He was but a mere heaven soul, how could he possibly be so strong? Yulan Fenghua looked at Ji Wuming again. This madman was also killing first secret, second secret, and third secret elites like he was chopping vegetable. She was the same kind of freak as Ling Han. How could there be such freaks in this world, and to have 2 of them pop up at the same time? Brother Yulan, this is your so-called spar? Ling Han asked calmly. This was completely a sneak attack. Yulan Fenghua looked embarrassed. At first, he had planned to kill Ling Han with a single blow, ending all his future worries. Who would have thought that Ling Han would actually be so freakish? He was clearly only a heaven soul, yet his battle prowess could match that of Yulan Fenghua, who was a first secret monarch tier. And now with Ling Han mocking him directly, he was naturally extremely displeased, and wanted nothing more than to kick Ling Han to the other side of the world so that he could then escape from this awkward situation. He hardened his heart. In this present situation, it was worse the more he spoke. He might as well just remain silent. Ji Wuming was committing mass slaughter, and appeared to be planning to massacre all of them, and he only had to kill Ling Han. Then, all his actions today would naturally be known to no one. Ling Han, you should die now. He charged out again. In his eyes, though Ling Han was very freakish, he was still just a heaven's soul no matter how freakish he was, and he himself was a first secret monarch tier. As long as he went all out, it would definitely be him winning. Laws have no bounds. He channeled a powerful attack, its might soaring to the heavens. He was the holy son of the Imperial Void sect, and was the personal disciple of the Imperial Void Celestial King at that. Not only did he have a grasp of many celestial techniques, their might was also incredibly strong. This, laws have no bounds, was a secret technique that he could only use after advancing to the Immortal Palace tier, and was endlessly strong. Boom, it was as if he had become the ruler of the heavens. His palm descended, capable of piercing through the heavens, directly striking onto the underworld. This attack was quite strong, Ling Han thought internally, yet was completely unafraid. Using fists of fury, he launched his own attack at that massive palm. Pung! The fist blasted onto that colossal palm, and did not even pause before directly penetrating the palm and striking out. The power of regulation vibrated, instantly covering the entire palm. Then, this gargantuan palm collapsed and crumbled. Ling Han's fist was aimed straight for Yulan Fenghua. Yulan Fenghua quickly leaped up, dodging this blow, his expression filled with absolute disbelief. He had shot out a powerful attack, and not only had he not managed to suppress Ling Han, it had instead been destroyed with a single punch from the latter. He was just a mere heaven soul, and was actually even stronger than Yulan Fenghua, who was a first secret monarch tier. How was this possible? Though his heart was astounded, he still summoned a battle spear without hesitation. With a wave of his hands, wang, 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 multiple seals on the battle spear lit up, exuding a terrifying aura. He declared arrogantly, "This is the weapon my master used in the Immortal Palace tier. Though it is not a celestial tool, it has been instilled with my master's invincible fighting spirit. This spear's name is Celestial Killer." Celestial Killer? How arrogant. The strongest in the celestial realm were celestials, but the Imperial Void Celestial King actually named this spear as Celestial Killer? Just what kind of lofty ambition was that? Ling Han smiled faintly, and said, "Unfortunately, your master is your master, and you are you. There is no way the two of you can be talked about in the same breath." "Nonsense, I will definitely be the second coming of my master in future," Yulan Fenghua declared loudly. "You won't be." Ling Han shook his head. "You haven't even cultivated dividing 9 souls dividing soul tier to perfection, and are merely mediocre." Small Tower's assessment of the Imperial Void Celestial King was that the latter was qualified to ascend to the Heavenly Venerable tier. Then, this person had to have formed 9 divided souls. Yulan Fenghua had not formed 9 divided souls, and wanted to become the second Imperial Void Celestial King. Wasn't that just being delusional? "After your death, I will carve the word mediocre onto your grave." Yulan Fenghua charged out, wielding his spear. The tip of the spear was flowing with endless sharp violence. It was clearly no celestial tool, yet seemed to be even more powerful than any celestial tool. This was because there was no Immortal Palace tier that could fully activate the full might of a celestial tool. On the contrary, the might of 5 stars and 6 stars pseudo-celestial tools could be fully released in the hands of an Immortal Palace tier. It was just how techniques did not differ in strength. The strongest technique would be the one that was suited to one. Boom, the piercing attack shot forwards, its vicious might soaring to the heavens. This was not just the combined force of Yulan Fenghua and the Celestial Killer Spear. It also included the invincible intent that the Imperial Void Celestial King had previously left behind in the Celestial Killer Spear. He had a chance of becoming a heavenly venerate, so what did that signify? At that time, the Imperial Void Celestial King had to be a prodigy of the same strength as Ling Han and Ji Wuming, or perhaps even slightly stronger than them. It was rumored that he had cultivated the Severing Mundane tier to the point that he could deliver no further strikes, and only then did he advance into the Dividing Soul tier. Which also meant that even though Yulan Fenghua had only pierced forwards with a spear, it was equivalent to the full-force blow of Yulan Fenghua, the Imperial Void Celestial King, and a 6-star pseudo-celestial tool all combined. Ling Han looked intrigued. Of course, his interest was not directed at Yulan Fenghua, but rather at the Imperial Void Celestial King. To be exact, it was towards the Imperial Void Celestial King when he had still been in the Immortal Palace tier. Ling Han wanted to battle the Imperial Void Celestial King in this proxy manner. Raising his fist, he charged towards the Celestial Killer Spear in attack. Pooh! A stream of blood gushed out, and Ling Han's fist was immediately dripping with blood. Ha ha ha, with your mere body of flesh and blood, you actually dare to stand against the Celestial Killer Spear. You are merely asking for your own suffering. Yulan Fenghua smirked coldly. Meanwhile, Ling Han looked at his fist. The source power of wood activated, and the wound immediately recovered at a visibly fast rate. Though this still contained the martial intent of the Imperial Void Celestial King, as well as the destructive power of a 6-star pseudo-celestial tool, the source power of wood was at the Celestial King tier. It was naturally easy for it to dissipate these factors. It was now very hard for his physique to further improve in strength. He would need an ocean's worth of natural treasures working together with the indestructible Heaven Scroll to be able to improve his physique further. Imperial Void Celestial King truly lives up to his reputation. Ling Han nodded, showing a solemn expression. Though he had only glimpsed the tip of the iceberg, the Imperial Void Celestial King definitely had to be world-shakingly powerful when he had been in the Immortal Palace tier to be able to just have a sliver of vicious intent explode, and cause even Ling Han's physique to be outmatched. After all, Ling Han presently was only equivalent to First Secret, and had not really advanced into the Immortal Palace tier yet. Yulan Fenghua was furious. Ling Han actually overlooked him completely, and the more he praised the Imperial Void Celestial King as extraordinary, the further he looked down on him. The might of my master naturally shakes the whole world, so how could you possibly look up to him? Yulan Fenghua declared arrogantly. You will become the dust of history soon. Ling Han chuckled and replied, if it had been the Imperial Void Celestial King from that time, I would definitely have battled him gladly. Too bad, you are too weak, so you are not even qualified to incite my fighting spirit. Only this spear is worthy of my interest in playing with it. Yulan Fenghua trembled with fury. He was a super monarch tier, and it had always been him calling the shots, and looking down on all the other prodigies of the world, yet now he was actually treated with such utter contempt. Only the spear in his hands was worthy of Ling Han's interest to play around. You can just continue to speak tough, but you will very soon regret, and find out just how terrifying I can be in my fury. He calmed down, and practically spat out each word, his killing intent boiling over. Ling Han cracked a smile. Oh, scowling? Die. Yulan Fenghua could no longer bear it. With a battle cry, his figure charged out, the Celestial Killer Spear sweeping out in attack, its murderous aura surging to the heavens. You're tuning into the Biyao's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.